On the motion to approve the minutes as amended, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion's carried unanimously. The next item is public communications. And one commission communications to the staff. Does anyone in the public wish to address us tonight? It's on the item that's on the agenda. Would you state your name and address for the
My name is Tom O'Farrell. I live on Brookshaven Road in Groton, and I'd like to make a few comments about what's on the agenda for the car wash tonight, if that's okay.
Yes.
As I said, my name is Tom O'Farrell. I live at 34 Brookshaven Road along with my wife Teresa. We strongly oppose the application for the development of a car wash on 402 to 420 Long Hill Road. We are not opposed to the development of these lots in any way, but we are opposed to the type of development of this application. We don't believe it fits the CN zoning regulation as written. Part of the CN zoning regulation reads as follows: the CN district is meant to accommodate lighter neighborhood serving retail nodes or gateways that can serve as a smooth transition between commercial and residential uses. According to current zoning regulations, the CR zoning regulation states it is meant to accommodate heavier uses such as auto-oriented operations. The proposed car wash is most definitely an auto-oriented operation and is in direct conflict with the CN zoning regulation that is meant to accommodate lighter neighborhood serving retail. Also, a car wash is not a gateway that serves as a smooth transition between commercial and residential use. On the contrary, the backside of this car wash would be on Brookshaven Road. This commercial property would be directly in a residential neighborhood. That is not a smooth transition. It's not a transition at all. The regulation goes on to say it may include 1-unit dwellings, though 2-unit and multi-unit dwellings are preferred in order to support commercial uses and serve as a buffer to neighboring residential districts. We would argue that the business of a car wash and the noise and motor vehicle traffic that goes along with it is anything but a buffer, especially when considered parts of the development of a residential street and a house at 126. The CN regulation continues with high quality human scale design with an emphasis on pedestrian connections and green spaces desired for development in this district that is meant to play a transitional role between commercial and residential uses. This plan does not have an emphasis on pedestrian connections or green space at all. In fact, its intent is the exact opposite. Its purpose would be to drive as much motor vehicle traffic as possible 7 days a week to this location. I'd also like to say a couple things about precedent. Approval of this type of development would set a precedent that would allow similar developments of heavy auto-oriented operations in other CN zones. If this proposal moves forward and the other 3 adjacent lots are developed with this type of heavy use, we believe it would be a significant detriment to the neighborhood. In regards to need, doesn't feel a need for the town. There's 3 car washes within 1.5 miles of this property. In regards to light and noise pollution, I'm not sure, but I believe the business is open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. One of the questions I would have, will the vacuum stations be open 24 hours a day? If so, that would be a major concern. Not only would the noise of the vacuums be an issue so close to residences, many folks tend to detail their cars with the music blasting. Someone running a vacuum at any hour of the day, potentially 7 days a week, with the music blaring would be very inappropriate this close to a residential area. And the last note I'd like to make is about property values. Brookshaven Road is an established neighborhood. Most property owners in this development purchased their homes when the lots now proposed for development were actually zoned as office and multifamily. We don't believe that any homeowner that has been there for years would ever have imagined there was a possibility that this type of business would be permitted when they purchase their homes. I know we. And lastly, we have lived at Brookshaven Road for 15 years and have poured countless hours of effort and significant funds into making our house a home we love. We are asking the commission to please consider this and protect ours as well as our neighbors' investment in quality of life. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm Nancy Steenberg. I live at 493 Pequot Avenue, and I'm here to speak about the requirement that a sidewalk be placed in front of Precious Memories Daycare Center on Sandy Hollow Road. I've lived at 493 Pequot Avenue since 1983. Count it, that's almost 39 years. The neighborhood has changed quite a bit since then. When Precious Memories was first approved in, I believe it was 1998, there was a requirement for sidewalks that was waived. They expanded. Again, the requirement for sidewalks was waived. They expanded again in 2019, and again, the requirement for sidewalks was waived. Sandy Hollow is a very narrow road. When it was resurfaced, they put curbing on both sides of the road. I have 2 dogs. I like to walk my dogs. There are neighbors who ride their bikes. There are neighbors who jog. There are people who push strollers. It is practically impossible to walk on the hill in front of Sandy Hollow Road in place of a sidewalk. I actually requested again, I believe last winter, that you reconsider having sidewalks put in there because I had a young dog. And I've trained the young dog, but she sometimes gets startled. And with no leeway for safety, even when I'm walking on that grass, if she dashes to my right, she comes in contact with cars. The people coming in and out of the daycare center come off Allen Street. I witness this nearly every morning. They are on their phones. This is not the fault of the daycare center, but they're on their phones. They make a fast left turn. They don't notice, even if I'm on the grass, that I'm there. Sometimes I don't have a chance to get out of the way. I mean, I haven't been hit yet, okay? But it is dangerous. There are now 6 approved building lots slightly to the east on Sandy Hollow Road. 2 houses have been built there. Another is under construction. The medical center, which was a pre-existing non-conforming use, was approved for use as a commercial accounting firm. So the neighborhood has changed. The traffic pattern is heavier. I'm merely asking that Precious Memories Daycare be required to have a sidewalk, provide safety. I hope none of you have to come to my funeral if I get hit by somebody who makes that left turn off Allen Street and jumps the curb. But there have been times I have felt at risk. Please consider asking this commercial establishment to step up to its professional requirements and provide the safety, not just for me and my dogs, but for everyone who wants to walk on that street. Also, eastbound on Sandy Hollow Road, because of the curbing, there is no place to get off the road if a car does not give the required, I believe it is 3 feet, swing around a pedestrian. So walking both directions, people have to walk on the south side of Sandy Hollow Road. It is not safe. Please make it safe. Thank you.
Yes.
Douglas Schwartz, 420 Long Hill and 0 Brookshaven. Before I speak about the car wash, I'd just like to briefly mention the moratorium on data centers. As this commission, I'm sure, has noticed in the last couple of years, you've been forced to clean up messes you've inherited from others. And these usually begin in Hartford, and they benefit deep pocket individuals. I think any community which allows a data center in should have its head examined. Wallingford kicked them out, and Basra denied without prejudice. The reason is, first of all, they shouldn't get a tax break. There's no reason for them to get a tax break. These serve the biggest corporations in the world: Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook. Those are the people who use these things. Second of all, it's a huge tax on the rest of us in the form of higher electric rates. According to Mr. Quinn at the public meetings with the town council, we have the highest Connecticut has the highest electric rates in the country. And Anybody who thinks that these massive energy consumers will go in without affecting, there's a finite amount of electricity in the grid. Anybody who thinks these can go in without raising the rates on the rest of us is missing the picture. Bill Grant, who's submitted some good information to this commission on this subject, has calculated that they're going to use as much electricity. This is just the most recent one on Flanders Road, as all the households in the 4 largest cities in Connecticut: Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, and Stamford. So I think not only should you have a moratorium, but you should have a ban. And I commend you for trying to clean up another mess. Regarding the car wash, my family has owned this property for over 50 years. And the first thing hopefully I can address Mr. O'Farrell's concerns. And these were the same concerns he listed when he spoke to you in October, I believe. But he left out what I think was his main concern. Tonight, he left that out. And he's concerned that this is the camel's nose under the tent, and the buyer intends to start with a car wash and continue with the plan which existed over a year ago, which is to go all the way down to the corner by Applebee's at the light. And he was concerned then about traffic for people coming out of Brookshaven in that area. The first thing I want to let you know, the first thing I asked the buyer when we sat down to negotiate was if he planned to exit from the back lot, from my Brookshaven lot on the Brookshaven Road. And he said no. And I said, fine. It's that assemblage which existed over a year ago is not what's going on today. And this is not the camel's nose under the tent. That assemblage fell apart. Somebody pulled out, and it's that simple. And as you know, after many years, this commission finally changed the zoning to allow full retail uses from OMF, and the whole block and the whole area was struggling because there was no longer any demand for office space for various reasons, including the rise of the internet. But as you know, this is an approved use of a car wash. So I guess you could put me down as in favor.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address this tonight?
Hi, I'm Gary Milton. I own 35 Brookshaven Road, and I own 121 Brookshaven. And I'm against this car wash because it is an impact on the neighborhood, and it butts right, almost right up. The only thing separating me from this car wash is the road. What's this going to do to my property values? And I've been there since October of 1990. All I'm saying is I'm against it. We don't need another car wash.
Anyone else wish to address this? I have no way. Oh, okay.
I can talk about the sidewalk too.
Yes,
It works. Okay, my attorney's not here, so I'm really gonna probably mess this up, but I'm gonna try. Barbara Bohanowitz, owner of Precious Memories Preschool of Sandy Hollow, 195 Sandy Hollow Road. I am confused because we did put in about 300 feet of sidewalk when we did this second expansion. And I was told that we put it on Allen Street because Sandy Hollow Road was deemed scenic. And that's why they wanted to encourage us to continue the sidewalk down Allen Street so that it connected. The one thing I will agree with, maybe for the first time, I do believe that pedestrians walking on Sandy Hollow Road is not conducive to being safe. I walked there just the other night to remind myself where we did put in the sidewalk. I walked the other direction. Being scenic, there's stone walls, there's all sorts of power issues. It is narrow. I don't see where the sidewalk could go in. I do find that eventually someday the sidewalk could continue if the state put in a traffic light at the intersection of Allen Street and right off the highway. But I agree, the cars come off of all the cars, not just PMP's cars. They can't come off of exit 89, which is one of 2 exits from Mystic, Connecticut. They come off, they yield, they hardly stop, and they go. I tried to cross the other night, and I was nervous to cross. I can't imagine someone crossing with an animal. I can't imagine someone crossing with a child, a stroller at this point in time. You know, once you put in the appropriate, what you did at the other end at Route 1 and Allen Street, something like that. We use it all the time. Push the button, it's okay to cross, people have to stop. I agree then. It would also tie in to what I personally paid for, a lot of that sidewalk, it would tie in. At this point in time, I am confused where, it seems like a sidewalk to nowhere would be the answer at this point in time. Maybe a few years down the line when the state, I've been told they're gonna put something in. But right now, I find it to be a reckless decision to encourage people to walk down toward that direction when the other direction, there's a multitude of choices to go toward beautiful downtown Mystic that's so much more safe for children and animals. I also just want to say personally, and maybe I'm overstepping, I find the timing shocking. I have 165 families at my school, and I have 250 on my wait list again. I service Pfizer and EB, and I have to turn people away, but I also have to turn people away because I cannot find the staffing right now, and the state of Connecticut is aware of this. It's a national issue. I need to give my girls raises right now. I need to do everything I can for incentives for my staff. The COVID has, I have not asked my parents to pay. I've waived the tuition for 2 years because I just can't sleep at night, asking them to pay when I can't offer them a service. And that's followed right into a national issue, and it's all over the news. And Connecticut is no exception, that we are struggling with getting staff. I think it's the Great Resignation it's called, I'm not sure, but we're feeling the pinch of that as well. So I'm trying to actually not close down rooms for that reason as well. So I am trying to, come up with incentives and raises, et cetera. To come up with the funding for the sidewalk right now does seem out of step with the timing of what's going on in the world globally. And like I said, I service Pfizer with pharmaceuticals, vaccines, and I service EB for defense. So I guess just I'm grateful. I'm forever grateful, and I know with all respect that you have a right to ask me to do it. I'm just trying to be logical with the timing, et cetera. It's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Anyone else have anything to say? Yes.
Hello. Hello, Mr. Todd. How you doing? My name's Adam Pacino. I'm a D1 representative for Town of Groton. I live at 94 Brookshaven Road, right down the road from these two gentlemen and this gentleman's property. I do believe that being across the street from the fire station is really a bad place to put a car wash. We don't need it anyway, but being across the fire station, having all that extra traffic at an intersection that's already a tough one to get around with the, it's a four-way intersection. We got two roads in the parking lot of the apartment building across the street. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, and then you got a fire department. We don't need to add any more situations there to impede the fire department. If they get slowed down for 15 seconds, it's not much time. But when my house is burning, 15 seconds is a long time. There are 117 dwellings down that Culver Lane, the condos and Brookshaven Lane, and all of which are going to be impacted by this. I don't know if any of you live behind a car wash or a gas station, but I never seen a thriving neighborhood behind those establishments. There are plenty of places to put a car wash down the road with this empty, unused property right now by next to Hillary Company, as a matter of fact. I do believe that this is the camel's nose, as George mentioned, because they're asking $2 million for the other three pieces of property. You're asking $2 million for three pieces of property. You don't want to sell it. Once that gas station is in, the sale's not going to happen, but it's going to come off the market, and then they're going to try to put the gas station in as well. I just don't see this as genuine. I just want to have a small business over here. There's plenty of other places for that small business. We don't need it. We don't need to ruin our neighborhood. It should be some nice green space between Route 1 and us. I mean, I understand that they're developing the property is going to bring tax income, but it's not going to bring enough to make up for what's going to be detrimental to that neighborhood behind it. With that said, I think I'm done. Thank you.
Statement? Not then we can, oh, we have some. One person.
Hello. Good evening, Chairman Pritchard and fellow commissioners. Excuse me. My name is Tom Bradham and I reside at 7 Gravel Street in Mystic. I apologize for not being at the podium to address you this evening, but I'm a bit under the weather, so to speak, so I thought it best to spare you in the audience. I will be brief, but I do want to take this opportunity to address the commission on the subject of amendments to the zoning regulations, especially as you again have Horsley Witten on the payroll. However, as surprising as it may be, I do not want to speak about short-term rentals, data centers, or marijuana sales. These issues are all somewhat related, however, when one thinks about them long enough, perhaps. I do want to speak to you about amending the current zoning regulations, however, specifically sections 1.2, authority, and 4.2, interpretation. As you are all well aware, the Groton Town Charter and the general statutes of the state of Connecticut provide you as commission members the sole authority to render land use decisions in the town. I'm going to spare us all a reading of chapter and verse, so to speak, of the general statutes of the state of Connecticut tonight, and just speak in English, not bureaucratic jargon, to you. Of course, for those following along at home, I assure you I'm conveying the spirit of the Blue Book as we all know it. I also want to preface my suggested changes with these caveats. Number 1, I have never met the town of Groton's zoning official. Number 2, I have never spoken or corresponded with the zoning official. Number 3, I am sure the zoning official is a fine gentleman. Nonetheless, the commission needs to delete the first sentence of section 1.2, which reads, and I quote, "The town of Groton zoning official has the authority to interpret these regulations," unquote. It won't even cost you much to delete this sentence. I'll spring for the whiteout or the delete key on a new keyboard. Here's why this sentence must go. Number 1, I am not sure state statutes permit the PZC to delegate this authority to a career bureaucrat. Number 2, when asked why this sentence was in the current regulation months ago, staff responded it was for administrative convenience. 3, as a career bureaucrat myself, I can understand why the staff wants this sentence in the regulations. As commissioners, however, you must not allow staff convenience to trump your authority and responsibility to town residents. Number 4, the zoning official need not even be a resident elector in the town of Groton. All town elected and appointed officials like yourself must be resident electors. Number 5, at last count, there are 169 separate and distinct municipalities in the state of Connecticut. I challenge you to find another municipality where this sentence exists in the zoning regulations. Number 6, for example, our zoning official lives in Griswold, where he happens to be a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. This sentence is nowhere to be found in the zoning regulations of his community. Everything I have said above applies to section 4.2 also. Just substitute, quote, Planning and Zoning Commission, unquote, wherever the words, quote, the zoning official, unquote, appears. Simple, inexpensive fix. In summary, I'll offer this pearl of wisdom that was given to me by a wise legislator many years ago. Quote, regulation should reflect honestly the spirit and intent of this body in enacting its laws and serving the public, unquote. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
No one else. Someone on business. Next item is site plans, SIT 2205, proposed car wash. This presentation.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I
he
just want to
says-
speak up. Now the rustling of paper really
But
disrupts
he's
the
on that
recording.
stuff. Group to it.
Take them on for most.
So moved.
Did you?
Buying thing on the website.
Okay.
so
Okay. Colors moving. Okay. Let me just get the camera going. So actually, I'll turn it around so it faces the commission. You're welcome to adjust if you need to.
Oh, I think I can do any good if I touch that. Thank you. Record, my name is Jim Bernardino. I'm with EMG Engineering, representing renewable energy for the redevelopment of 2 parcels on Long Hill Road, located at 402 Long Hill Road, which is the current Nail place, and 420 Long Hill Road, which is old. It's currently a vacant off-road use currently in it. There's also a 3rd parcel towards the back of the property located. Has been identified as the address of that property. The proposal, as you heard in the public communication, is to combine these properties, and we'll be creating 1 parcel that will house a proposed car wash facility. Going to a proposed plan at this point. Well, let me talk about the existing conditions a little bit. This is just a copy of the survey. Mentioned the 3 properties, 402 Long Hill Road, 420, as well as the undeveloped parcel at the rear that butts up against Brookshaven Road. The proposed properties in combination will be approximately 1.4 acres. They are located in the commercial neighborhood zone. As stated before, the wash being the car wash that is currently being proposed is an allowed use with conditions. Obviously, we can run through some criteria in a little bit. We do have the project attorney who's on his way. He's been hung up. We do apologize for that. He's actually on the agenda a little later on. He just informed me just before I came up that he is en route as well. So we'll probably be here midway presentation or something close to that effect. Just to get a little acclimated to the project, just to the north of the site is 95 Culver Road. Just to the south There's an existing commercial building as well. We'll take a look at the proposed development. And here is. We are looking at a reconfiguration as a property. So the proposed development will contain 2 lots. Lot 1, which is going to be approximately 1.48 acres. That 1.11 acres, I apologize, which will house the proposed car wash. Lot 2 is approximately 0.37 acres. That is a compliant lot per the current zoning regulations. That will be established to maintain the existing building. So the proposed building located at 420 will remain. The parking area in the front will remain. We're actually going to remove some pavement in that location as well, but reconfigure the parking scenario to allow for a combined access to the 2 properties. So we're going to be closing 4 curb cuts that are along Long Hill Road. So we're going to be consolidating curb cuts and sharing a common access drive for the 2 parcels. Additionally, speaking of access, shared access, the regulations encourage cross-access communications and the like between abutting properties to accomplish the elimination of curb cuts along Long Hill Road. And as I mentioned before, we're taking 4 curb cuts, consolidating them down to 1. But we are also providing the potential for a future cross-access easement to the adjoining property to allow for, inter-travel between the uses. Head over, there's a signalized intersection just to the south. So from a site circulation design point, it made appropriate sense to allow for that cross-access. We did evaluate the potential cross-access for the property to the north. However, with the operations of the proposed car wash, the circulation of the site that is going to be required to have a safe and convenient site access and circulations for the customers, that access and circulation didn't allow for an appropriate access to the north. So we did evaluate that. However, due to the use and the intended site circulation, it wasn't practical to tie into the property to the north. However, to the south, that has been proposed. The car wash apologize. We are looking at about 3,260 square feet of a proposed fully automated car wash. Associated with the car wash, we do have, I apologize, 8 vacuum stations, 8 vacuum positions. We also provide 2 transient parking spaces for the customers. They come out of the gas station, they're able to park their car, shanning it off if necessary. And then we do have parking, employee parking, as well as a handicap parking space.
Did you say gas station?
Excuse me, I apologize, not a gas station, car wash. And I do like to address that real quickly. Obviously, there's no plans for future development behind this by the applicant. His agreement has expired and been terminated for all the property to the north that heads up to Culver. So he has no involvement in that development or future development for any matter of that. So this is not, a camel's head underneath the tent. So the proposed access is obviously a full movement access to the site from Long Hill Road. We have been in communications with DOT. They have provided preliminary feedback. We've responded to them as well. Their comments that we received of late have been very minor in nature. Their remaining comments that they have is regarding sign placement, striping lengths, things of that nature. They have not commented or had any concerns that have been noted regarding the intensity of the use with the number of trips per day, turning movements in or out of the site. So there's minor engineering aspects that need to be detailed out to the DOT's satisfaction. However, you would not, the DOT's comments that are outstanding, you would not see any fundamental changes to the site plan configuration. They're more finite details. The operations of the gas station are somewhat, the car wash, I'm sorry. Last week I had 3 gas station areas. I apologize. So for the car wash, there are, the operations is to gain access from Long Hill Road into what we have as pay stations, automatic pay stations. You'll be able to purchase your car wash, the level that you would like to, the level of package depending on the attorneys here, and Mr. Sweeney below. As far as goes, all cars will be directed into the site to circulate in the counterclockwise motion. And at the pay stations, they'll be able to come in and through the site. Everybody's being funneled through these pay stations. And however, some people may forget their wallet or don't realize that they did not want to utilize the car wash. So there will be a attendant full-time on staff that if that does, if that is indeed the case, they would be able to bypass, the working arms so that customers could pull through and actually leave the site. So we provided an exit lane where customers that unintentionally came into the site, forgot their wallet, or for whatever reason, they are able to traverse into the site through and back out without having to go through the car wash. Additionally, we've addressed a handful of items within the zoning regulations. As far as loading areas, we do have a dedicated loading area to the site. We only anticipate smaller vehicles, the small box trucks that come in very infrequently to load off supplies to the car wash. We do have all public utilities on the property. We do have water, sewer, public, as well as electric. The site will be serviced by private refuse company. So we do have an enclosed dumpster located on the site towards the back to enhance the screening, obviously, for that. We have also addressed drainage concerns from the development. In looking at the existing conditions, all the flow from the site primarily flowed from Long Hill Road back towards the Brooklyn Haven area. To address the impacts or potential impacts as it relates to the development of the site, we reduced quite a bit, a significant amount of impervious area that's at 420, which currently sheet flows to the rear of the property. And for the redevelopment part for the car wash, we have a stormwater system that collects, treats, and infiltrates 100% of the stormwater that's generated on that site. So basically all the water that used to flow there now, we have a new development, we're taking that water and we are dissipating it into the groundwater through an engineered, practiced underground detention system. We've also prepared an erosion and sediment control plan to address construction-related impacts. Those best practices are implemented on the plan. We have erosion controls. We have filter silt sacks installed at all the proposed catch basins. We've implemented a construction entrance. So we believe that we've done appropriate measures to protect against construction-related impacts. We have also developed a lighting plan that was part of the overall set. That lighting plan has detailed light fixtures on it and demonstrating that there's no negative impacts to the abutting parcels with light spillage. Lastly, We've prepared a grading, landscaping, and buffer plans and exhibits that we want to touch base on because we are of understanding of potential concerns related to the impacts related to the residential neighborhood to the east of the property. I believe we did submit a colored rendering version of this exhibit to the board. I'm sorry, to the commission. If you don't have it handy, I could throw just a few versions out to everybody. So. So this one right here. This is the landscape plan with the plantings and vegetation that has been proposed. We worked closely with staff on a couple of rounds of reviews that resulted in the landscaping plan that's in front of you today. We've provided street trees along the corridor along the road. We provided a fair amount of interior landscaping as well. But one other aspect that we focused on during our design process was screening and buffering to the Brookshaven neighborhood. As such, there were various buffers that are allowed within the zoning regulations to address the car wash use specifically within this current zoning district. Now, the first one we looked at and tried to achieve and implement was a standalone 25-foot no-touch buffer to the rear property. And looking at that, we looked at what our customers are expecting, what we need and obligated as professional engineers to provide to them, which is really a safe access and site circulation, meaning into the site, into the car wash and out. Imposing the additional area or distance setback from the rear property line for the buffer zone would greatly reduce turning radii in and out of the site, obviously making it not comfortable for the customers, jumping curbs, things of that nature. So obviously that's something that we would like to avoid. Additionally, to accommodate a full 25-foot buffer, we would be looking at the requirement to reduce the length of the overall tunnel of the car wash. Right now, they're about 110 feet. Industry standard is around 120 to 130 for a fully automated car wash. So we're a little bit light on the overall length. What that length gives everybody is the services, the time in the tunnel, and meaning when I say services, you're able to give all the extra add-ons and bells and whistles. The shorter the tunnel, the fewer of those bells and whistles are that can be provided, obviously. And then also the length of the tunnel allows us to process cars more efficiently to get in and out, which would assist with reducing queuing and speeding up the actual process and time of the experience that the customers is on the site. So that's the reasoning for why we didn't choose that 25-foot buffer. We did look at it, we had many options, the turning radii did not work very well. So what we looked to do was implement a solid wall with a screen fence, as well as a comprehensive planting plan with very dense evergreen plantings, 10 feet on center, which is a tall, fast-growing arborvitae. The arborvitaes are going to be, I believe, 10 to 12 feet. Bear with me, 12 to 14 feet at planting. So at planting, they're going to be double line height, ceiling height at the time of planting. And as you can see, we have a full line, 10 feet on center, providing a complete screen of that rear area. Now, we do meet all other aspects of the zoning. In addition to the evergreen buffer screen that's going to be installed, we do have a retaining wall located in proximity, or actually inside, outside of the yard setbacks. New regulations in the last 4 or 5 months came to fruition that retaining walls need to be a certain distance away from the property line and the like. So what we did was we took that opportunity to install a retaining wall and incorporate that into our buffer screen. So not only do we have the vegetation buffer, we also have a retaining wall that's approximately 8 feet at its peak and then slopes down to meeting natural grade. So on top of that wall, we also have a 4-foot high, basically not a security fence, but a safety fence. It's going to be a chain link fence, but it will have privacy slots on. So there'll be additional screening from the low side. So what we did was we took the opportunity to try to visualize this for it. So as part of the overall submission, we took a look at looking at a section from the car wash down to the residential neighbor that is directly abutting, which is 126 Brookshaven Road. Looking down, this is the shop corner of Brookshaven. This is the back of the building. Approximate location of the existing single family residence that's there. And we looked at a section view through this. Oh, I'm sorry, where do we want to go? Yeah, let me try to get there. That good enough? Yep. Okay. Sorry, my apologies. So what we did was took a look at what's the practicality? Is this buffer, the screen wall really going to work? And we took the opportunity to do this section through it and make sure that we show the appropriate planting and vegetations and the right species of plants that will, one, grow quickly to provide the buffer that's going to be intended. And then 2, obviously be a year-round screen. So taking a look, this is the car wash elevation with the car coming into the approach. This car here is basically turning around the corner as you look at it. Here's our front setback line. Now our front setback line, we do have a retaining wall, which is approximately 8 feet at its tallest, but drops down relatively fast. And we have a proposed fence that's going to have some screening components to it as well. And here's our building with approximate elevations of the roof line up in here. First floor, second floor, because we know that we need to screen and potentially protect those people from the access out of the second floor as well. So down here, this is the building.
What building?
This is the neighbor at 426. Maybe, let me give you there.
Do you have to draw up the scale?
The 11 by 17 is the scale. Yes.
This is to scale?
Well, I blew this up. It was drawn at 11 by 17. That was submitted to the commission. I just blew this up for presentation and visual purposes. So it's to a scale, but a very odd scale. It's not a 1 to 10 scale as it was.
Okay.
So yes, it is all proportional, the heights and the elevations. So again, the neighbor at 126 Brookshaven, first floor window, second floor window. So we show the proposed arborvitae, fast growing arborvitae at planting height. We show approximately 10 feet, but the plans call for 12 to 14. Now, the height of the tree is estimated to get up to about 19 feet by year 3. It's a fast growing tree, about 3 feet per year. So we're anticipating by year 3 that the majority of the car wash will be screened from the second floor building, never mind the first. First floor building will be completely screened. And then obviously the mature height of these trees reached about to 50, 55 feet approximately. With that, obviously, there, excuse me. So with that, we believe that we've, the combination of the wall, the fence, and the fast-growing arborvitae, we are providing the appropriate buffer to that neighborhood to our east, which is Brookhaven. With that, that was the majority of the presentation that I wanted to have, and I know Bill probably has another handful of high-level stuff that he wants to touch base with. So, Bill, if you want to jump up.
Thank you, James.
Yeah.
For the record, my name is Bill Sweeney. I'm a land use attorney, partner at Global Harbor in London. It's really nice to see you all again tonight. I want to give my apologies. A very difficult and very busy spring, and I've been double booked. I think this is the fourth night I've been double booked, and I was promised to be in and out in the town of Waterford in no more than 20 minutes. That promise wasn't kept, so I apologize. I'm a few minutes late tonight, and I do know that some members of the public may have spoken during your public input phase, and I certainly was not privy to those comments, so I apologize. I'm repetitive, and I don't respond to those. Just a couple things, and I know you've had a comprehensive presentation by our project engineer, and I don't want to go over the project again. But some things I think just from the zoning perspective, I think that's really important. I'll just remind the commission that this is a site plan application. Is a site plan application for a use that your zoning regulations has determined is a permitted use with conditions within the neighborhood commercial CN district. And I think that's an important thing as you consider the use that's before you tonight. We work really closely with staff, literally for a period of a number of months. With Diane and then with Bruce, and then most recently with Deb, we've sort of been moved through the planners through the time, but to really modify and improve the plan. And we've tried to make efforts to try to make it a better plan and still get a reasonable commercial use out of this property, which my client and the property owner is entitled to have as a matter of law. By state law, you know if an applicant submits a site plan application for a use, and they meet all the conditional requirements under your regulations within a particular zone, they're entitled to an approval. And I think it's important to distinguish a site plan application. And I know for those of you who've been on the commission for a long time, it's important to realize to distinguish it from a special permit application. It's not a subjective decision. This isn't a special permit. This is not a public hearing. And there isn't the consideration that you normally have in a special permit. For instance, things like input to neighborhood character, which quite frankly isn't allowed anymore under the state statutes, but it's not allowed in a site plan application, nor is impact to adjacent property values. Those are things that this commission is not entitled to consider in a site plan review. What you are required to review are your site plan objectives, compliance with the zoning regulations, and in the way your regulations are set up, those special conditions for this particular use, which is a vehicle washing facility. Again, something that you made the determination is a permitted use in the CN zone. This is a use that is allowed in the CN zone. So I just want to point out and just go through these quickly with you. Our plan has been reviewed by all town departments and agencies, including your town engineering department. There is a DOT review for an encroachment permit on this project as well. I want to just bring to your attention that we believe, and we believe that your reviewers have found that there's adequate access for police, fire, and ambulance services. We have good access from Long Hill Road. We don't have access from Brookhaven Road. We really try to create a barrier between the residential neighborhood to the east and this site. We have tried very hard to landscape this site within reason and provide a buffer to the east. And the option that Mr. Bernardino has put forward to you is one of the two options that's allowed for buffering between commercial and residential properties. You heard the explanation that we did look at both ways, the 25-foot buffer, and then the buffer that includes a wall or other type of screening. This site is not deep enough to accommodate the 25-foot buffer and still have the safe turning radiuses for cars and emergency vehicles. So we're using an option that's allowed in your zoning regulations to provide the buffer. I would say also, I just put into the record that we did contact this one neighbor next door, or we did attempt to contact. This is really the only neighbor, if you look at the location map, that has any proximity to this project. The house is close to the property line, and so that's why we put as much time and effort into the screening that we've provided. The owner of this house, as I understand it, talking to my client, may not speak English as his first language, and we had some issues with communication and getting any response back. But despite that fact, we're still committed to trying to work and make sure that we protect his view to a reasonable extent as allowed under the regulations. We've been careful with our lighting. We've submitted a photometric plan to make sure that we don't spread unnecessary glare off-site, and certainly anywhere toward the adjacent neighborhood. Our utility infrastructure is sufficient to meet the needs of the use. There's no sensitive environmental features on the property. Our use is wholly consistent with Long Hill Road in the CN district. But again, we're trying to properly buffer it because we know there's neighborhoods behind it. And finally, your last site plan objection, there's obviously no impact to Long Island Sound from the project. As I said before, in addition to these site plan objectives, you also need to look at your specific conditions for vehicle washing facilities. And that's actually included in section 5.113D. So again, these are on top of the site plan objectives. You have to have a minimum lot size of 35,000 square feet for a car washing automatic facility. We have that. Where our car wash tunnel is located, the entrance is located at the rear of the building. You can't have it visible from a public right of way. So we've done that and we've screened it so you can't see it from a public right of way. I would also point out that it's significantly higher than anything to the rear of the site. The water from the car wash is going to be recycled, which is another one of your requirements. Our stacking spaces that we provided in our access lanes are in excess of what's required by your regulations. Again, the site is served with public water and sewer. Our building itself is made of composite materials and impact resistant masonry, so it meets the physical material requirements. We are vacuuming facilities, which are at the front of the site, are outside of the front yard, which is prohibited under your conditions. We moved all those outside of the front yard area. We don't have any outdoor storage. Everything is in place in the state-of-the-art car wash tunnel that we're putting in place. And due to the nature of the operation, this is not a park your car and people come out and scrub your car. This is a car wash tunnel, so we don't have waiting areas. People drive through and they drive through the tunnel and are cleaned. From our perspective, we meet the requirements under your zoning regulations. Again, site plan objective, zoning compliance. Our buffer meets the requirement of option 2 under your buffer requirements. And we meet all the vehicle washing facility conditions. So therefore, we believe that we have compliance with the regulations that are entitled to the site plan approval. We're happy to answer any questions you have regarding any of the design or the operational points. I've got representatives from Noble Energy and Sophie Noble, which is sort of the brand for the car washes under the Noble Energy parent company. If you have any questions about how the car wash works or how anything works with inside the building, we'd be happy to try to answer those further as well. Thank you for your time tonight.
Does the applicant have anything else that?
Not at this moment.
Staff.
I have a couple of things. I want to reiterate, this is a permitted use in this zone, conditionally permitted. Because it's a conditional use, a buffer is required to the residential zone property behind it. The commission has the ability to choose which buffer they feel is appropriate. There are 3 different options, and you've heard about 2 of them. One is a 25-foot landscape buffer. The second is a wall, berm, or fence with landscaping, and there's no minimum dimension for what that needs to be. And then the third is natural vegetation. But again, the commission has the ultimate decision as to what buffer they feel is appropriate. With regards to the connector.
This would be considered a natural vegetation.
No, it would not. Absolutely, no, it would not. A natural vegetation is if they actually had a significant tree line out there and they were just going to leave it in place.
Oh.
That is, yeah, that's not, they didn't consider it because it just doesn't work with this site. They considered the other 2. They are proposing allowing a connector to the adjacent physical therapy building. So that when that building, if it ever comes in for a new site plan, we will make that connection so that folks will be able to go out to the light. Be easier to make a left-hand turn at a light. Didn't think it was necessary to make sure that they could get out to both lights. There are 2 lights in proximity to this, as long as they can get to one. They are proposing to close off curb cuts, as was noted, that will be replaced with sidewalks along Long Hill Road. There's also an internal walk that will go to the office building that is slated to remain. Lighting was, right, the photometric plan was also in your packet, shows no light spillage onto adjacent properties. The water in the car wash will be recycled. The stormwater will be discharged after being treated in a deep sump catch basin that catches a lot of particulates. It will go to an infiltrator chamber that is underneath the parking lot. I think that is it. Do you have any questions?
Open it up to the commission for any comments or questions. Let's start with you now.
Okay. We're going to start with the generality with Deb. It says in terms of what conditions we can impose on this object besides the buffer. Is there anything else? Because
It meets zoning. Yeah. Then you need to approve it.
okay,
It meets the conditions.
okay. But with the nature of the buffer, though, you can
You have some options.
we have some options. For the record, the only reason they didn't do the 25 feet buffer, which actually wouldn't make me that happy either, because the 25-foot buffer is because it didn't fit with the proposed car wash. So it's not our obligation, just for the record, it's not our obligation to make your car wash work. It's our obligation to make it fit into the neighborhood. But be that as it may, I'm not pushing that particular aspect. But whether or not it fits with the car wash is not our issue. That's good for the town. We would just say, find a shorter car wash. Sorry, that would be one of the solutions. I'm not pushing that. But given that, in terms of what the buffer is, we're going to squeeze it down to as much as you are. Sure, the visuals look like they might be pretty good, especially once these are ready in. I see a little fence there that barely comes up to people's windows. How tall is that little fence? It's a proposed fence, and it looks like it's just a short little fence on top of the chain.
4-foot fence.
4-foot fence. So in this case, one of the things that the buffer is supposed to do is visually and operationally and acoustically. So I would just say, I see a fix for this is that the fence is too small. So, arborvitae, by the way, does 0 acoustically. One row of trees is virtually transparent, no matter what it looks like or sounds like rustling. And this thing will be noisy when it's in operation, but it's directional.
Mr. Zad, I actually take all of your comments with a great deal of respect, as I've always respected your position on matters. That fence could be heightened if the commission felt that that would be helpful. I would say also that while there is noise in the tunnel, compared to other drive-through lanes that have, for instance, at like a fast food restaurant that may have speakers or ordering, and the fact that this facility is not open at late night hours, like a 24-hour McDonald's or Burger King, I think this access lane is very different than other drive-throughs, and the noise is really situated in the building rather than outside. But I think, we can increase the height of that, particularly if it's valuable, if the commission finds it's valuable, particularly in the first couple of years, as those 12 to 14 foot arborvitae that we're going to plant are growing to 19 to 20 feet. That's something that we could do to try to ameliorate or mitigate a concern.
I don't think it needs to be a 12-foot fence.
It's a chain link fence.
No, that's a plastic fence.
It's actually a chain link fence.
That's a chain link
Slats.
fence. Oh, okay, so it's a plastic. And I'd say, you need something solid. in any case, even with the arborvitae, during the winter, as cars make that turn after sunset, which they will, it will be open and people will be washing their cars during that period. You'll still be strafing, the lights will be strafing through there. But it will be nice. And having the fence be something solid, nothing massive, but
Sure.
solid.
A different material is what
Different
you're suggesting.
material. Probably, what I've always loved, and frankly, what we did all over California, they're not expensive. I don't see them. There's just, they make that as kind of freaking concrete. It lasts absolutely forever. They're not expensive to put in. They're more expensive than chain link, but they're not expensive. And acoustically, they're perfect. So I would say just stack a 6-foot stamped concrete thing on there. It's going to disappear on the other side with the neighbors. And if they can't see it, hear it, smell it, I think it's okay.
We certainly, I think we'd be open to a fence of a different material. I'm not sure my engineer's familiar with that mode of fencing. I don't know if Deb is,
But like it.
but I mean, certainly, we could provide a fence of 6-foot height that is solid rather than chain link. And again, I'm not familiar with the stamped concrete fence that you're talking about either, but something like that or equivalent to that, I think is something we could accommodate if that is the primary concern of the commission.
And for this, and have those two. So 6, I'd be okay with 6 feet and have some mass to it. And also just, you have the vacuum cleaners. And that's another simple one, is that a little bit more fencing wrapping around the vacuum cleaner parking on the back. Some fencing.
Shows where the vacuum cleaners are. If you point those out for commissioners. Actually in the front of the building.
Like you say, the front, but I'm saying that they're acoustically, it's open that way.
Acoustically, understood, and be able to increase that fence to 6 feet.
And that, they have a little wing wall over here.
Yeah. Similar fence to match.
We're talking right
Exactly.
there.
That's right there.
That could easily be accommodated.
Yeah, nice little piece and.
There's no conflict, that doesn't create any conflict for any operation on the site.
Then we'll be able to move it. I'm going to cause it won't be a fundamental.
Commissioner Zod, would you be satisfied with a fence 6 feet high of a material to be approved by your staff?
Sure.
And just as a suggestion, as a compromise position. And if your staff was not comfortable, we can always bring it back to you for ratification.
Does it put in there of sufficient mass is what we're looking for too. In engineering terms, we need a mass.
You're looking for something that blocks light, but also creates some sound
It's sound.
mitigation as well.
So the two things would be taken care of. The sound would be included.
I think those are reasonable conditions.
You said that the tunnels is not supposed to be visible, looking into the tunnels, it's supposed to be visible from public right of way.
It's the entrance to the tunnel. It's not
So
supposed to.
not the exit though.
Yeah, so it's, I believe, and I think Deb has it.
It's just the entrance of regulation. It's not the opening, it's the entrance.
Automobile access into the building should be positioned so as not to be visible from the public way.
Since it's a one-way thing, and that doesn't count. Okay, that's a really funky one. That's what I was thinking of. And I think your fencing, what we're talking about already takes care of that.
We've also, we've got the repaired stone wall
Right.
there. We also have street trees and vegetation right on the outside here that really softens it up a little bit.
I'd have to concede that from a marketing standpoint, you need to see clean cars coming out of the facility.
Well, and that was an issue, even in our discussions with landscaping, there's always that balance between site visibility for commercial use and then also reasonable landscaping to make it aesthetically attractive.
Now, the connection to the building to the south. People are saying that we would allow it. Why would that building to the south think of doing this?
I mean, this one here,
Yeah,
all right,
it's a
so,
great idea. I mean,
Yeah.
Really, to me, it's almost essential to get to that light. But why
so that you
do
can,
they do it?
they wouldn't do it until such time that they wanted to do something with this building, and your new regulations actually encourage all site plans to allow for cross access where feasible and possible. So if the owner of this property, what we would do is put a cross easement in place here to benefit this property. If the owner of this property came in next year, or maybe 15 years from now, and said, we want to redevelop this site, Deb or her successor would say, hey, by the way, there is a cross easement in place. We want a reciprocal one on the other side to open up the curb cut between the two properties so that you could have flow through the properties.
So we just have to hope for them to develop, do something there.
That's,
That's a requirement.
that's how it's worked all the way up Route 1.
Yeah.
And it happens,
It has worked, but except I'm not sure if it's working.
It is.
Okay.
and it happens, quite frankly, that a lot of towns use the reciprocal cross easement. It's actually particularly along busy thoroughfares like Route 1. They do that to try to avoid unnecessary curb.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a good planning tool.
Yeah, we got it working on the other side of the street, just wondered how that worked, if you don't redevelop the property. Little details that you got in the sidewalk. The sidewalk that gets it and then it stops, it doesn't make it to the building.
That would be where that cross easement would be.
Well, okay.
So you would have vehicular traffic across that.
That'd be fine, because then you can cross it and whatnot, but in the meantime, for the next 10 or 50 years, the sidewalk just seems to stop, and when I get to the other side, in fact, I've got a planting thing and cars parked, so it's precluding me walking to that building without going in between cars.
Yeah, we can modify the landscape island here to still provide the tree, but extend the sidewalk on the backside of the curb to connect that.
Exactly, the backside or the other side, which would be
Yeah,
better. I would say do it on the other side, just to make it next to the parking, to the car. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, that's no issue.
Light encroachment, but I think the photometrics doesn't do much for me, because I don't know which way to show up on the photometrics. You can have
They're all downlit
downlit
and shielded where they need to be shielded on the
Okay,
property
so no effect.
line. Exactly, they are all downlit.
Okay. And for me, this is limited to the hours limit on this, right? But not weekends, it's still gonna be going, but I'm taking care of it. 7 o'clock, so it's
Maybe 7 to 8 shortened hours on Sundays. The vacuums will be turned off at the end of the day. It won't be 24-hour vacuums.
So you can't pull in and use a vacuum when the place is shut down.
The vacuums will be off, and they're also single serve vacuums, so they'll be off in between use. We don't have one large turbine that will constantly be making noise. They'll only be used when there's a customer at said vacuum.
Because this thing's kind of up in the air as you look towards the southeast too. I mean, we look at Brookhaven Road, but it also faces the backyard of Nick Street. And it's curable too, just by a little extension of fence, I believe. Because right now, that's another backyard neighborhood. And here's my fence, and it stops there. You could just pull it around.
You
So
could wrap the fence
wrap
around.
the fence around.
Just so you know, this is all naturally vegetated right
I
now.
understand that, but it's still. It's still stuff happening.
If that's something that you would like, you know,
I
again,
think
that's a minor thing that we'd be
That
happy
will make
about.
everybody's backyard happier over there too.
Right.
I don't think you need to landscape or something, but just get a curl fence around. And that wraps it for me.
Right. So, Mr. Sweeney, I heard you say, and I wrote it down, you said the vacuums are in the front of the building.
Correct.
Well,
Well-
the sign is good.
Yeah, no, I just heard him say that. And I just
Yeah,
was a little
so I
bit.
mean, the building is
Yeah,
situated here,
okay,
but
so the building is like turned sideways, is that what you're calling it?
yeah, it's put in simply because of the nature,
Alright,
but
that's
yes, but they're right.
I thought that's what you meant, but I heard it and it was kind of like rang in my head. How was it determined that, and I guess this is for Deb, that this was a permitted use? I mean, when I read CN commercial neighborhood,
So, yeah, it's in the
It's in the
table.
table.
The description that you are reading on that page right there is meant, it's not a regulation. It is meant to describe generally what should happen in that zone.
okay, and a
But
car
you-
wash is.
But you've got to go to the
You gotta
table
go.
of uses and see
Okay.
that it is
All right.
conditionally allowed.
Okay, and what is, so then the conditions are then it has to meet
The lot size,
these things here.
right,
So I guess my concern, my biggest concern, I don't know how it's resolved, is this buffer, which when I look at it, and I draw, and that's why I asked if this was drawn to scale, is that I look at the window, bedroom window, I'm assuming on the second floor of this house, and I draw a straight line through it, and to the top of that fence, I'm coming in about 4 feet below the bottom elevation of the building. So like, it's gonna be, I mean, there is essentially, the way it's drawn here, no buffer for that bedroom and that house for probably 3 to 6 years from now. And then those trees are essentially upside down ice cream cones. So just about exactly the other triangle is a void. So when I'm looking at this, the trees would have to be probably the 50 feet tall in order to make that. I don't know, I'm not an arborist, but
Yeah, and
close, and so that you're gonna be looking through every one of these trees at everything that's going on. And then you've got a building up there that essentially is got cars going through it that, from what I would guess, I mean, you're better at sound than I am, this thing's gonna act like a cannon. It's gonna be projecting the sound out, I don't know, it seem like it. And then 8 vacuum cleaners running. I don't know, I just have a hard time imagining that any buffer like this is gonna, and one of our conditions is that it has to deal with noise. So I know that's a tough thing to sort of like mitigate and to identify, but I don't see anything here that's stopping the noise coming out of this thing. And even if it's just one house,
I think
somebody's house.
somebody, we can answer that question directly. Why don't you get up and explain how the tunnel actually works for sound? Because I think there's a misunderstanding of how the actual tunnel works.
Yeah,
So would
so
you say your name and address? Who you work for?
I'm Matt Auger. I work for Sophie Noble. I'm the director of operations. I live in Hartford now. So as far as the tunnel, just for starts, the first 26 feet of our tunnel is a prep area. There's no equipment there. The next good chunk of feet, about 50, I'd like to say, is all virtually silent equipment. Aside from maybe a creak of a spring or something, it's silent. The only noise that would really come out of the car wash is at the end where the dryers are, and that will be going out towards the road with the 40,000 car traffic count, which will be significantly louder than the actual sound volume that comes out of the car wash.
And are there doors on?
And we also have, we have the steel or metal security doors that will be closed during close times. We also have basically a plastic weather door that will go up and down between cars, and that would block any additional sound aside from the time that the car is physically passing it to get to the car. So there won't be much loud equipment facing the houses to begin with, which just happened to work really well with what the regulations said, that the car, had to be blocked to begin with and the exit had to be facing.
I would also submit that regardless of whether you had 25 feet or not, if you had 25 feet, it's really not practical. Trees that are more than 12 or 14 feet tall. When you start to plant trees that are above that height, the likelihood of them staying and actually being able to be transplanted. So even if you expanded the width of the depth of the buffer, it necessarily address the height issue. And so width is not the only issue here. It's a question of what is reasonable under the circumstances. It's not to provide a complete visual screen, but a reasonable buffer to provide some separation between the commercial and residential uses. And I think it's important, you know, your regulations do say, and Deb's correct, your regulations say that at the end of the day, you're ultimately responsible for choosing which option is acceptable. But your regulations like 3 different options, and they say these are 3 options that an applicant can use. One of them doesn't work at all. That's the natural vegetation. In fact, the natural vegetation actually requires 1.5 times the 25-foot buffer. So it would be something, you know, you'd be up almost 40 feet of separation under natural vegetation. You don't have the natural vegetation to do that. But you have this issue of a 25-foot strip or some creative way to create reasonable separation. And I think, you know, we certainly follow the intent of that. And again, I agree with Commissioner Zod. It's not their job to worry about what the use is. It's sure that the buffer is reasonable. It's not that it necessarily fits in the neighborhood, but it's reasonable under the circumstances of the situation. Circumstances of the situation is there is a residential house, it's a rental house next door that is near the property line, and it is 2 stories. That second-story bedroom is going to have an issue with whatever commercial use takes place there, regardless of the buffer, at least until trees can grow up.
And I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more on that buffer as well. And when you're actually looking at the elevations, I got in over here year 3. As you can see, year 3 is actually above the top of the window on the 2nd floor. So that's why we actually picked the species that we did, is to enhance a fast growth rate to get by participating year 3 to be actually above the elevation of the 6th story window. Additionally, look, we're going to be adding, you know, a couple feet on top of the existing wall here with the sight lines coming down, which will, the solid fence will actually enhance some of the sight lines as well. You did mention that, you know, I only can imagine the tree needs to be 50 feet to really block these views. That's another reason why, you know, we understood those concerns were there. We did pick a species that at maturity will be at that 50 feet height, give or take, you know, a handful of years, but we are anticipating a growth rate of about 3 feet per year. And then obviously some of the sound issues with Mr. Zod's comments that we would be implementing, we would have that additional solid mass wall that would provide some of the sound dampering that is obviously very desirable in a buffering situation. And we mentioned that we would be amenable to adding in that additional sound wing wall adjacent to the vacuum units themselves, providing additional layering as well. So I think, you know, we're definitely hitting, we believe we're addressing the intent and purpose of the buffer with what we're currently proposing.
I think that proposed wall might also help with sort of the background noise of this area. As you know, across the street from this site is the firehouse. So every time the fire, you know, sirens go, you know, that comes right across the empty properties now. So perhaps we might make the existing situation better in that way.
Yes, I'm just, you know, I have a time, like when I read the motion, and it says that we find that the wall, fence, landscaping plantings on the east side meet the intent. I mean, I'm telling these neighbors that they're, yeah, it meets the intent 3, 4, 6 years from now. It doesn't meet it when you're done.
I guess my response to that, and I respect your position, is if we divided the 25-foot, you're not going to meet the intent today either with that, and we're entitled at least.
But you know, but it has to comply. It has to mitigate the noise,
No, it doesn't. If we have to produce one of those to meet the requirement, this is not a subjective decision. You either meet option 2 or option 3. Ultimately, you can say, hey, listen, the only one that we're comfortable with is option 1. But at the end of the day, one of these has to comply. This is what you set forth as your separation between commercial and residential districts.
my position at this point is that doesn't work. So we got to figure out something else.
The interject here is that we're trying to stop that from the east to the east elevation. That's actually what that neighboring house is. So it's just that.
And it's the cars coming around.
It's the cars coming around. That one, the fence will take care of it. The building itself is that. It's not this. It's not side elevations. You're going.
No, I get it. The building is long and this is short.
Very short.
Yeah, no, it's that, and then we don't see the vacuum cleaners that are there either, right?
No, and actually, you kind of almost couldn't hear them. So,
Yeah, so for me, waiting 3, 4, 6 years is
And it's not a visual,
unreasonable.
the visual. This is the visual. It's like, when you're looking up.
Unless you're in that house.
No,
Again, though, my point is, if we provided option 1, the 25-foot buffer, the person in the second floor window will still see the commercial use of this property,
Yeah.
whether it's a car wash or a convenience store,
And
or it doesn't matter, they're still gonna see it because of the nature of how close that house is to the property line. And you can't say, oh, just because they can see it, that's not the standard. The standard is you must provide a buffer of one of these 3 options. 2 of them are potentially eligible for this site.
Correct. I elaborate on that too. If a 25-foot buffer were to be provided, we wouldn't have that would be 50 feet. We would have a 4-foot high fence on top of our wall and then a 25-foot buffer that has virtually screening like we're proposing today.
And they only have to be 6 feet in height.
You know, 6 feet in height, but we're proposing something that's 12 to 14 that's fast growing. So I think with the buffer that we're proposing with the vegetation, the very expensive purchase of a 14-foot high tree at planting, provides that visual buffer. I don't think a 25-foot buffer under the regulations that are currently outlined would provide a visual buffer as it is currently proposed. Because we are going above and beyond. It's a matter of just a 50-foot tree, but moving the fence line back 12 feet.
Gotcha.
One of the things I would point out is when you have landscaping shown on a site plan, that is part of the buffer. Ongoing obligation of property owner to maintain that landscaping. One of the things that happens is you may plant 20 trees, but die. We have an ongoing responsibility to maintain that buffer in perpetuity as long as the use is established. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind in some level, I know that the Noble Company is relatively new in southeastern Connecticut. They have extensive holdings in the northern part of the state and the western part of the state. And one of the things I was really attracted to the opportunity to present them is they've got a great reputation of running really clean operations, whether it's their gas station business or here, their car wash business. They want to be part of the community and they're going to be obligated to keep this site in compliance going forward, or they're in violation of their site.
Yeah. If there were the 25-foot buffer, because public street, what would the plantings look like?
So if we're under option 1, at minimum, the plantings have to consist of evergreens that are 6 feet in height.
No, if it was a 25-foot buffer, and then we've got this commercial property on, would we not have some sort of landscaping?
Right, you would have to landscape that 25-foot buffer, that's right, with 6-foot high evergreens.
Which is essentially what we have here now.
No, it's not. They're actually proposing something much taller than 6 feet.
No, I don't mean that. I mean, we have evergreen trees there now that are along this road.
Along Brookshaven?
Yeah. I'm getting.
You've got a mix of deciduous
Yeah.
and coniferous, primarily deciduous, not planted trees, but just.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if it were the 25-foot buffer, There will be plantings along that edge of that road.
There would be plantings within that 25-foot buffer. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's my,
But the minimum height, they only have to be initially 6 feet.
okay,
That's right.
all right.
That's right. That's right. And then with the option that they've chosen, there's not a, you know, a minimum height on the landscaping, and the purpose of the landscaping is to soften the appearance of the wall.
And so it's a 6-foot tree, we're looking at a 10-foot tree.
Or a 12-foot.
12 to 14 feet are specified.
Planting. Okay. So it's twice the size, and if you think it grows 3 feet a year, that's how many, if you only planted a 6-foot tree, you know, you need to go, it's an extra 2 years to get up to 12 feet. So.
And then 3 to get to.
You're looking at 5 years before the window is covered rather than 3.
And that's what I'm inclined to think. 25-foot buffer.
Then
Absolutely.
we'll lose the visual.
Not 6 feet, it's 2 feet a year. It's 6 feet.
Visual variant.
They could put up rhododendrons.
At 25 feet.
Yeah, it's mentioned is evergreens. It doesn't mean the same plant type of plantings, but obviously the goal is to provide an adequate buffer. That's what we're trying to protect.
Put these arborvitae's and they're really dense. Because my neighbor has some, actually started to cut down. So, see, you can't see through it.
With the density.
And they do grow tall. So that would be the best thing.
But do we have to make a decision tonight? What's the timing on
Yes,
this?
exactly. You have to make a decision by June 16th. So there is one additional meeting.
That's it. The only thing that I would, and I asked this in the past, is like, I would, because I think that that neighborhood, some of it is at an elevation which is lower than this. I'm just saying, we don't ever see cross sections through neighborhoods. In this case, might benefit the applicant. In other cases, they don't do it, and it is a disaster. So I think that for people who are making these kind of proposals, and we should probably try to get a picture of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I have an aerial of the neighborhood.
Well, it's elevations is what I'm concerned with.
Sections.
Cross sections of the neighborhood.
Neighborhood.
That's what, I mean, that's usually people only draw to the lot.
But when you look at the neighborhood itself. Now, we have our landscaping wall through here. Obviously, the main progress is to develop a lot at the corner. We're aware.
$3,000 just. Excuse me, you cannot participate in the discussion.
Right, so, you know, and we are proposing to wrap the location of the vegetation and the like along the retaining wall. When you're looking at an elevation, the lower you get, the higher the angle you're gonna have to the tops of the trees. So you're gonna be looking higher up. So it's really the higher the elevation you are, which is the property here on Brookshaven, is the more critical section that we need to look at.
And 402 Long Hill Road is a long hill. That's the highest point. If you think about it, it comes up to this property and then down toward the shopping centers. So we're at the highest point on the road. But I think Commissioner Kane is correct that, and if you have taken a ride through that neighborhood and looked at the neighborhood is substantially lower in elevation than our site. And I think that's part of what Mr. Bernardino says. Start thinking about the elevation of the line of sight when you put up these trees. You want taller trees, not 6-foot trees. You want 12, 14-foot trees. You want the retaining wall. You want a 6-foot solid fence on top. The angle of incidence, the angle of view, you're gonna see the top of the building, let alone anything from the various viewpoints within the village below.
Yeah, so, you know, for example, if you just put a piece of paper and look at the top of the board, now just yourself, you don't see the board
Yeah, no,
anymore.
I
you
get
see
it.
So,
No, I get it.
so
I just,
basically, the
you know,
lower neighborhood, you know.
we're never shown that, and it's a valuable piece of information.
I do agree, it's a valuable piece of information, but what we've done is we looked at the critical section, the one that is most affected by the property, and obviously they would just show a more substantial buffer, the lower you get from, the farther away you get from the site and lower, that buffer will appear the further you're away and down.
Should also be pointed out, this is a single-story building. The CN zone allows buildings up to 40 feet in height. We're not proposing that, but another use, maybe where there's a 25-foot buffer provided, you could have a 40-foot tall building on the same site. So compatibility-wise, it seems to be a fairly minimal intrusion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Couple questions. You mentioned something about a door. Can you explain that door again? Or let me just paraphrase and sit with that right. You drive up to pay, door goes up. You drive in, door goes down.
Essentially, yeah, you can have that, or you can keep it up. Most car washes keep it up during the summer, because there really isn't that much noise pollution as it's worried about. If that was something that the town wanted to see, it's something that we could have set.
Operationally, you can set it so the door goes down every single time.
Yes, operationally, it would be very easy to do.
Now, if we're talking about, as you say, noise that doesn't matter, then it's not gonna propagate over a property line. You know, I don't care, but do you have any noise numbers?
I don't have any on hand.
The only ones that we had were the blowers on the other end, and they were like 90 decibels, and that's all of them running at the same time. And that's within the side of the building, outside and drop decibels.
Which is,
A still stall runs at 108.
And ambient traffic is in that range, 70 to 80, I believe.
So,
Ambient traffic, just the cars driving by would be louder than.
All right, so your professional assessment is that noise emanating out of the back of the building with the door up is probably gonna be 60, 68.
yeah,
Well, that would be through the building out the back. That's not what you said.
so that would actually be what at the tunnel facing the road, it would actually be significantly quieter at the tunnel.
At the entrance.
And I'd just like to point out again that the road actually will be at a higher level. And as-
Understood, but the road is further.
But I think what Mr. Auger said is important, is that, you know, he's director of operations, he can program these tunnels. And if it's an issue of built-in suspenders, we can close the door on the entrance.
Yeah.
If there's a concern that we're not being forthright, or if there's a concern that maybe the sound is more than we say it is, we can do that if that's an issue that would address the concern on your
Or
part.
if complaints come up afterwards.
I'd rather do that up front, quite
All right.
frankly.
All right, is there any equipment on top of the building that would emanate noise? No pumps, no compressors? no-
Everything is enclosed into the back room and you won't be able to hear it from outside. You
Okay.
put your to the side of the wall on the outside. you won't be able to hear it.
Okay, now, you guys had a traffic study done?
Yes, we did.
Okay, what was I have no idea, what's the throughput on these things? What is your maximum throughput?
We can do about 120 cars an hour. If you're referring to how many cars can go in and out of the funnel.
And we provided the traffic study. CMG Engineering, which I'm affiliated with, did not prepare that. BL companies put together the traffic study for us as part of the site plan submission. We've also shared that with DOT and have gone back and forth. And we have no negative comments or, you know, concerns regarding the projections that we have and the
Just
suitability.
summarize for me the level of service before and after.
All right, well, give me a second. I'll take a peek.
All right,
I would just say, just to clarify a comment Mr. Auger made. said, he said he can do 120 cars an hour. That's if there's 120 cars
Waiting to
lined
go
up to go through. That's not sort of average. That's running full steam. That's what the plant can operate. I mean, how often do you get 120 cars an hour?
Pretty,
Right, it would be 2 a minute, yeah.
It's crazy.
I just like to get conservative numbers.
Okay, no, it doesn't sound, and obviously, everybody doesn't need their car washed on the thing.
Correct.
Hours of operation, you mentioned 7 AM in the morning to 8 PM.
Yes, and then
Is
they
that gonna
come,
be written? And vacuum turned off after that? You
Yeah.
mentioned something about reduced times on the weekends.
so Sundays, we're looking at probably about 8 to 6 PM.
All right, probably feel more comfortable at 9 in Sunday, but that can be written in as part of the, okay,
Yeah, that should be across the whole company. That's just how we operate it.
okay.
So, before we go, for the level of service at the site entrance drive.
Yeah.
They are left-hand turns out of the site westbound. Level of service of B in the AM. Level of C, level, at the site drive. B in the AM build, C in the PM as weekday, and Saturday peak is a B as well.
Are you gonna be able to, are they not gonna be able to cross the street, right, turn left?
Left turn out of the site. Right now, they're proposing a left turn.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, so you're gonna cross,
which is,
Yes, they'll have that. And what we've done is, the traffic study with the potential delays at the, we look at the intersection, DL companies did. Enhance the driveway to have a dedicated left and dedicated right turn to, alleviate some of the delays that we witness at the site for like right turn lane, people that want to take a right, head north. If someone's in front of them, want to take a left, then we have a little bit more of a delay. So to address those level of services and delays at the intersection, we added that second lane for the exit from the site driveway.
all right, trees, quick one, on the center. What are they,
10 feet on center.
10 feet on center, and what is a standard 10-foot tree?
Oh, those will get, 15 feet wide.
Yeah, we're talking, but I mean, you're gonna be able to see right through them like. In
the very beginning, you'll be able to see through it at, when you're higher elevated up, yes.
Well, I mean, just, they're not gonna be chock-a-block next to one.
Correct. They won't touch you until maybe year 2 or 3. And then obviously they'll fill in, over time.
Yeah, I'm familiar, I've seen walls of these things, but certainly not when they're planted, I mean, they're sticks or. they're
Right,
essentially
and
pop-
most of the times when you see them planted, you have a much smaller tree. Most people go in and have a 6-foot arborvitae, which are readily available at almost any nursery. These are going to most likely be special order for the quantity and size that you need.
They're definitely going to be special.
The special, 12 to 14, so it'll probably be, it will be twice as big as most any new construction that you see.
They'll be wider than the 6-foot tall ones too. So I'm putting them on another project I'm working on right now. So you have to plant 10 feet apart, otherwise you won't have enough room for them at the adult stage. But when you go to 12 feet tall, they're going to be pretty full. Will you be able to see a little bit through them? Yeah, absolutely, because you need room to grow as it grows outwards as up, but it's exponentially upwards. They're like tall, they're tall structural trees. So
The first 14 feet, you have solid barrier between the retaining wall and 6-foot wall on top.
And then what kind of signage, and will it be lit all the time?
yeah. So you want to just show the architecturals and the signage on the building?
Freestanding sign up and down.
All the fun we had with signs.
All the fun we have in signs. So, but we'll show a copy of the architectural elevations. So. Architectural elevation, so the only signage that's proposed on the current building is exit of the building.
Can you pull it onto the camera, and I'll just zoom in on it.
Okay. A little bit.
Backwards, left is right, right is left.
And that's why, there we go. Almost there. Keep going.
Very good.
Exactly. Just across here. Across here. So, building elevations, the only sign that's on the building currently proposed is the Soapy Noble brand on the front. We do have a freestanding sign that'll be associated with the development as well. And that'll be in the front of the installation here. Be fully landscaped, decorated around there, just demonstrating. And here the internally illuminated sign. You know, it would be a monumental sign with a height of 7 feet tall, so it's only gonna be this high. So it's gonna be visible. We are providing street trees along the front, so we wanted somewhat of a lower, less obtrusive sign so we can visually see it underneath the canopy.
Okay.
So,
No
those are the two
big
signs.
rotating.
Nothing rotating.
Okay.
They are thinking about a bubble machine top, but that hasn't been implemented.
All right, I think that's it.
To answer your question about being illuminated, it would only be there in the time of business. So at night, off hours, it would not be illuminated.
Mr. Chairman, can I throw one more thing in that you just brought up? Traffic, coming, exiting, I'm looking at a picture and are you thinking of modifying or asking to be modified the street striping right now? Exactly where your driveway is going to exit is about where a left turn lane begins. So there's a lot happening right there for people to be turning left at it.
That's correct. And these do address left turns coming into the site. I'm not the traffic engineer, but I know that all the turning movements into the site, have been evaluated in comparison to the existing paved markings and the approach to the dedicated left lanes at the upcoming Max, I can't remember the intersection, but the next intersection is just to the south of us. And I just want to reiterate, very fact of DOT, and they've evaluated the analysis, and we haven't heard anything or even impartial as to any safety concerns with the turning movements as we are currently proposing.
DOT tends to count out how much broken glass there is after the fact. Almost serious to that. So, left-hand lane that if it was extended back to the north would take care of your problem. So that would be something we would request of you to not ask, is it okay with them? So because they'd have to do it. That's the paper. Do you have an image here sometimes of that? Because I'm talking about.
I think you've got an error in there.
The error.
Yeah, I think that's the best one. Sure.
And I would to the record that we are required to get an encroachment permit from DOT, and DOT has jurisdiction over the state.
Oh, I know.
But
Let's pull it over here so we can. So the driveway is going to be coming out right here. And there's that left turn lane. And the line's already doing something funky and then it comes back to make the left hand turn lane. So really, if the request we over here, there's the extra space. So right here is the extra space for the turn lane, and they just kind of bent this line around. So the request would be if you could just extend the whole driveway, so you would have people making a left hand turn without instantly being in traffic. Just put it back.
well, certainly we can have our traffic engineer look at it.
Look at it, make a
Yeah,
proposal.
but I can't speak to that right now. It wasn't something that's come up in our DOT review so far.
And more, I'm saying more would they? They're just saying, is what we have.
Well,
gonna kill anybody?
we're covering the review. Well, many of these type of offsite improvements come up all the time in the DOT review when pulls trip thresholds of delays, turning movements and things of that nature, which isn't present with the proposal that's in front of you.
You certainly be willing to take a look at it. But I think there is a concern.
I only had a couple of minor items. On the lot 420, how's that fit into the scheme of this? We're gonna combine all these three lots into one. It's gonna be separate.
Yeah, so what it is three lots. Let me see if I can explain it to you. Right now, we have three lots that make up the site.
Right.
And the idea is to reconfigure them down to two lots. So this is the lot line between.
So that's gonna.
This is gonna be a separate lot from all of this.
Remains of 420. That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to understand.
And so this is an approved use as office. That's what it's gonna stay.
Yeah.
But yes, this standalone separate lot,
Separate, that will be a separate one.
but there is access.
I understand what we're doing with that lot. It wasn't very clear.
Reconfigured lot line.
And that, and what remains is enough than the 35,000 required feet.
Correct.
Car. And on the drawings, most of them show some do not enter. Just on.
I can explain how the circulation.
L1s and 4.
Yeah.
But I think they're
Since we have
backwards.
do not enter.
Yeah.
Okay, so
That says do not enter, and there's an arrow that says there, the do not enter sign. On the wrong side.
exactly, it's on the wrong side.
That's right.
Yeah, it's, we understand,
Put
but we
them
have to
not
put a.
there, there, and on every one of those sheets.
Yeah.
They-
Yeah, we'll
they're
change it once
backwards.
and they change
And I
everywhere.
assume you put signs up for that.
Yes, and no, we will. We do have do not enter signage.
Yeah.
The-
It's
yes,
hard
we do.
to-
Yeah,
well,
we
gotta-
do call it the signs, their footnote B, which we like to say, everybody correct, the paint marking needs to be 180.
Yeah. Can you explain how the water gets processed or reused? Because they're supposed to it says it's supposed to be recycled.
Yes. I'm just making a note. If you want, I can. or-
Yeah, so I can start, and I found this over any of the super technical stuff, I'm sure someone.
I just have to process.
So in the simplest terms, leaving out all the car wash lingo, there's little underground tanks, settlement tanks. We use the water, it gets collected, it's one closed loop system, once it comes in. The water then goes through the settlement tanks, separate the settlement, the oils, things like that, and then the water is then treated and returned back to the car
How
wash.
does it get treated?
But when the
Goes
way-
through an ion exchanger?
Yeah,
So what happens is, inside of the tunnel, you have a big trench. So
Oh,
all,
no, yeah, but
all the water goes into that trench.
Yeah.
When you go through the
Yeah.
car wash. And then what happens is then it goes through and then it goes into a containment and then it'll separate out sediment, sand and whatever. Then you have 3 2-gallon tanks outside. It goes through a series of those and then. there's a pump.
what are those tanks? Are they ion
They're
exchangers?
separated outside to get back to a cleaner water.
Yeah.
So then that very last tank, what it's doing is there's a pump inside, it's drawn back into building to reuse it up. Now, we recycle back 68% of the water and reuse it. You'll do that in the beginning, that water will be used like in the beginning for prepping, undercarriage, spraying, cleaning the underside of the car. And then there's the processed water for where you won't have spotting when you got clean water. But then that clean water is going back into the recycle
That's
system
right.
and then goes through the whole cycle and comes back up. And before anything is discharged, so if those tanks get up to a certain level and they're too high, then they'll go into an oil water separator before they even go out into any other system.
Yeah, but eventually
What's that?
eventually, do you have to get rid of the water, some of it, or?
Well, then you have a maintenance on that oil water separator. It separates out everything. And then the cleaner water will go out to the storm and then you take care of that with an environmental truck and you clean those out.
does that go into the sanitary sewer or does it go into the
Hmm?
sanitary
Yeah,
sewer?
not in the storage sewer.
Oh, no, it's
No, I heard storm.
Right.
I don't mean.
Sanitary.
Yeah.
it's sanitary. And on your storm water report, you have a little copied somebody else's process and got the wrong organization. I think it's in the maintenance section. The stormwater management system long-term operation. And page Roman numeral, small Roman numeral 5. We're sending reports to East Lyme Planning. You cut and pasted. Without letting me know, like you- Can you fix it?
That was on the long-term O and M. What was that?
Yeah, find it.
I didn't find it, but.
It's down for inspections / record keeping.
Is that in the long term?
No, it's on, it's on the stormwater management system, long-term operation and maintenance plan.
So it's appendix G.
It's, yeah, I don't know, if you have the package, it's on
Yeah.
page 203. No, it's on that plan.
Yeah, I found it. Yeah, it's obviously,
There should go, if you want to put in a Groton plant apartment.
Yep, yes, yep.
OP. That's a plan. Hmm.
We'll be happy to make that correction. And any other references to the last project we just did in East Lyme, we'll make any changes to that. Amazingly enough, we don't recreate.
That's
the
why
wheel every time.
proofreading is not very accurate.
Well,
It
you,
is.
You've done a good job looking through every document.
It
does.
Like we used to reviewing a lot of plans and procedures and process words.
Yeah.
And they were very literal. I mean, you had to have
absolutely.
it in compliance. But just by chance, you pick something. You know, it just looks. So,
We're building a project line right now, so
oh,
I'm sure there was a little cut and paste going on, which is normal.
so safe. Yeah, so now you'll put in the drive.
We will fix it.
Tires
We will
in there,
fix it.
see if they catch.
I'm not sure if there's anybody in East Lyme that's as exactly as you are, but we'll see what we can do.
It's just by chance you pick up that stuff. That's all I have. Does anybody else have any questions? We have a draft motion. You want to put in some text for your.
We have to be spelling it out. And there be other technical items.
It's your
It
choice.
sounded awfully technical, so.
It's your choice.
It's just technical.
Sure, I mean, that the fence just be right.
Very specifically.
It was the extension of it, 2 different extensions on one behind to the north.
Yep, can be of sufficient mass to eliminate the sound.
And also extend to the south, that right? And
Yeah.
around what you're going the front of the building on the right hand side.
So that much better sound. It sounded like.
Yes, mostly smelling.
Yeah.
Is there an opportunity that we could put this off till the next meeting? I would like to go back out there and just, I did a drive by, I didn't actually get out, but I'd be more comfortable. to just Look at it again.
I guess we can do
It's your choice.
What's the date of the next meeting?
14, June 14. And I'll just let you guys know, we do have the public data center moratorium, and you will also have the Mystic Pizza deck, outdoor dining.
The only thing I would say is that it sounds like, to me, listening, that people are pretty much comfortable with it. I'm the only one. So I don't think that this issue, this item would take a lot of time.
Just postpones it.
Yeah.
Just would- okay. Continue.
I mean, I did drive by and look at it, but I would like to, after having this conversation, I would like to.
Well,
go back.
also, would end up with a number of voting, because you could end up with a tie vote. We could, because we got 4 people. Sometimes applicants have requested that we not vote with the potential.
Very easy word.
The reality is my client has contractual obligations to the seller who's sitting next to me right now. And really would like to be able to get the approval that I possible. Respect Commissioner Kane, though. The 14th is somewhat problematic for me. I probably will be having to do something similar that I did tonight, if you do decide, but you do have time in the statutes. If there's a condition of approval that Commissioner Kane entertained to be able to vote.
Well, I am leaning toward the 25-foot buffer and landscaping that we would get. But that's my concern. I would like to be able to go out there and just sort of like feel that feel.
We discussed that. What does anybody else think about the 25-foot buffer? I would be against it, because it's less control.
Not only that, but I think that for this one, you're gonna have a better visual buffer. If it's a visual buffer, you can be having these tall arborvitae's.
Yeah, I mean,
They're.
I think I'm looking at it as the buffer, and that 25 feet, granted, isn't going to give us any kind of significant visual buffer, but it would give us some sort of just things happening up here, cars driving by, lights, that all the business, and that given that whoever is enjoying this buffer is going to have to wait 3 or 4 or 5 years before it's visually complete. These trees right now, with the way they are, is barely going to be covering the wall.
But you're gonna end up permanently with a buffer that's not as effective. With a 25 feet. And if you have that 6-foot fence or bare wall there, you're not gonna have any light pollution. And it's from the second floor too. Most people don't go up to the second floor.
No,
except
but
for
it does say in our regulations,
business.
potential residential area. So I mean, I'd like to think of this as other things. I just would like to look at it, but
I would just
you know,
think
I get
25
it.
feet, that's from here to there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's not very good.
So if they all stood up, that's not a big deal. It's not as effective.
And actually, they stood up but scattered.
The thing is, well, the thing is that the buffer that we're getting are these trees, which are
Trees and fences.
3 years, the trees and the fence, yeah, which are 3 years out. Anyway,
They would be at the height, they were planning on now, would be at the height that you end up with a 25-foot buffer. We're starting off,
Taller than that.
yeah,
But the 25-foot buffer requires 6 foot.
yeah, so you're starting off with a taller buffer as proposed. And what you'd end up with a 25-foot after several years.
I don't think we'd ever get to anything that was worthwhile. The 25-foot buffer. Only requirements.
These things are pretty, because my neighbor has planted those things a long time ago. They're pretty dense, and you can't see them.
they're on, my neighbor has on their property as well. They have finally filled in, but it's been
Well, there are
the
different
green
kinds.
giant.
There are different kinds of.
Because the standard is the
arborvitae.
green giant.
These are these things that grow up tall.
These things are scary.
Yeah.
Green giant is very specific. The standard that we get is not for thundery pencils.
These things are really thin. So you're in a separate world.
How long you were proposing, it's 8 feet, right?
It's not,
I actually said 6. So I think we kind of, we started to modify that. So I'm not sure which is right. I think 6 would do it for most
Yeah,
cars.
I forget, there was talk about a chain link fence, and then a taller chain link fence, but then the harder.
I wanted a solid, yeah, chain link to.
Yeah, so we already agreed to the solid 6 feet high.
6
I think 6
Yeah.
feet high would do it. That's more lights we get over for many cars, the noise we get over, just, it covers every engine. So maybe, well, trucks aren't going to go through this, is a truck, but 6 foot is, you might be able to see the tops of vans. No, you wouldn't, because they're down below. So the guy across the street, from the next lot, from the second floor window, for a few years, will be able to see the tops of some vans.
but how many people usually don't even, most people don't use the second floor, so.
I beg your pardon.
I said.
Except for when there's
So vendors.
Yeah, but that, I suppose is at 8 o'clock, unless you're working third shift.
That's true.
That's true. So it's not. It's not.
Just trying to imagine 6 feet is, it's coming.
It's above the height of the house.
Off the ground.
This is
At year 3, that view will be blocked.
So,
Those fences weren't so.
well, you won't see it because.
Oh, it's, you'll be a peekaboo fence for a year. But then you go away.
We'll do something nice for the fence too. I mean, we can work with Deb to get something that is appropriate. Yeah, we're not gonna build something ugly. That's not what my client does, so. And we'll take the material that provides the visual and auditory screening that you're looking for.
What did you say the siding of the building is going to?
Composite with the masonry base.
So it looks like library, but it's composite.
Yeah.
Which can make a fence out of it too.
Exactly. Should probably, it's gonna be some type of composite material at the end of the day. And there's, comes in all different shapes and sizes, so we just have to spec one out for you.
We have 3 people. In favor of the motion. So,
I don't think we have a motion yet.
yes, you do.
Oh, the motion's been read.
No, but it's. I haven't read it because I didn't.
I
know
can
what
read
it-
it and then ask for comments and so that.
So we can avoid getting into more than one struggle and then. That's why we had the discussion, can we just accept the wall as a technical and then review the motion as a.
Yeah.
What are your feelings?
I would agree.
Hmm?
I would agree.
So if we have 3 in favor, Mike's and question, people staying.
Okay.
I just assume,
They're done that.
I just assume go. I assume the applicant has no problem. with the motion.
Absolutely, and you know, I think you guys know, I've already have a close working relationship with the town staff. If there's anything else we can do to tweak something or correct something on the plan, we will do so.
So I'll make a motion to approve the site plan SIT 22-05, proposed car wash 402-421 Hill Road with the following modifications. 1, a note shall be placed on the plan that states Any modification to this plan imposed by another federal, state, or local agency shall require additional review by town staff or the commission, whichever is appropriate. 2, the lot shall be combined and reconfigured prior to filing the site plan and land records. 3, technical items as raised by staff shall be addressed. Findings, the plan and zoning commission finds that the wall, fence, and landscape plantings on the east side of the site meet the intent of section 8.1-6 for the zoning regulation. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion on the motion?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we're gonna say the same thing.
On technical items, two things, technical items is raised by staff and commission,
Well,
because we raised the items. It wasn't their items that they raised. Usually it's their not raising items. You know, we raised them, so I'll bring it back to what we said.
okay,
And then finds that the wall,
you want to say raised by staff?
finds that the wall.
As modified.
And so modified.
You want to make that as an amendment?
Yeah.
Okay.
And 2 points, right?
Yes. So, sort of things. Is there a second to the amendment? Second. Second. So we'll vote on the amendment. All those in favor to the amendment? Let's say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention. The motion is carried, so we'll vote on the motion as amended for the proposed car wash. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstention.
Motion is carried, 3 in favor, 1 abstention.
Thank you very much to the commission. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, you know that microphone. Want to move that going?
Thanks, though. Special permit.
Say that car wash was.
I was trying to pick up the last CBA. I don't know if it's mics or what.
You know,
I don't even.
they thought so.
Is the other room.
What's in the other ones? Yeah.
You know, that's what that is.
It might have been.
Mercedes.
Computer.
You didn't see that?
That-
Look at that. Look at the sign.
Oh.
Didn't look like there was any.
I think they did that.
Pictures. The camera was fine, just-
Okay, yeah, I'll definitely.
Did you notice that the car that they used on that was Sue's car? It's a Mercedes.
Oh, is it?
Did you do that on purpose?
I don't do anything on purpose like that. So, they prop me up and just throw me and say, go into this meeting, go to that meeting.
They didn't put a VW. Should have put SUV to see the height. Oh, kind of what it was. All right, so we back to business. We have our old business, precious memories, sidewalk.
Yes.
Did you want to talk about what the statement?
So,
And I only have this letter that.
okay, so let me just do the background and then I'll turn it over to Barbara Bahanowitz, who is the owner of Precious Memories and her attorney, Bill Sweeney. So let me just do the background on this. So originally, Precious Memories was approved in 1998, the first building. And at that point, the Planning Commission did not require sidewalks on either of the frontages, Allen Street or Sandy Hollow Road. Instead, they required that the owners enter into a sidewalk agreement that was filed in land records. That basically says if conditions change out there, the commission can require, and the applicant agrees, to install sidewalks. Okay. As you guys know, there have been a number of expansions. In 2002, the expansion plan did not require any sidewalk. The Planning Commission agreed to leave the sidewalk agreement in place. A 2005 modification. At that point, the Planning Commission required that the Allen Street sidewalk be installed. And rather than install it along the actual frontage of Precious Memories, they required that it be on the other side of Allen Street because that's where the sidewalk network was developing. And as noted, there were some 340 linear feet of concrete sidewalk installed on that side. In 2019, that was the last approval that the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed. As part of the decision, the commission decided to allow the sidewalk agreement to remain in place and not require frontage walks along Sandy Hollow Road. At that time, the lots that were noted down on the east end of Sandy Hollow Road, those had been approved. So the commission was aware of that and aware of the traffic. And there have been no further land use approvals along Sandy Hollow since 2019. And then, as you know, last year you had a request from a resident of the area to revisit that sidewalk agreement and determine whether or not it's appropriate to install the walk now to change circumstances. Let you guys take it from there.
Then you did a great job sort of describing the background. And I particularly appreciated the clarification on Allen Street, because in that 2002 approval, it was actually part of the motion that the commission deemed the funding by my client of the Allen Street sidewalk on the west side was in lieu of the sidewalks on her frontage. So that's very clear that that's done. So really the only issue now is sidewalks along Sandy Hollow Road. As Deb probably said, I wasn't around in 1998. I was actually a planner up in Norwich, and I wasn't involved in 2005, but I wasn't here in 2019. And so I was part of the latest edition when the commission made a finding in its decision on the extension or the delay of sidewalks on Sandy Hollow. And I just want to read, because I think it's really important to read specifically the language that this commission adopted at that time. And it said, that finding in 2019 said that the Planning and Zoning Commission finds that the further postponement of installing the portion of frontage sidewalk along Sandy Hollow will not significantly endanger health, safety, or welfare of the existing or anticipated pedestrian traffic along the frontage of the property. The commission therefore extends the postponement of frontage sidewalk along Sandy Hollow Road to a future date that will be determined by the commission, and this is the most important part, when additional development and or pedestrian activity changes the condition of the area. I think that's important because it's not an arbitrary standard. Something has to happen, something has to change to actually require that sidewalk to be built. And I want to talk about that tonight, but I also want to talk about some other aspects of why we don't think these sidewalks should be installed now and why postponement should continue. I wrote a letter to you, and I think that might be the letter that the chairman talked to. I did that at the advice of Mr. Lofgren, who's no longer with us, to hopefully at least give you our position on the matter. So I'm going to review with that with you and ask for additional detail tonight. We acknowledge that sidewalks are part of the 1998 approval, including sidewalks on Sandy Hollow Lane. We still feel that sidewalks on Sandy Hollow Lane is not appropriate, though. If we had our druthers, we would never put them in. We acknowledge, though, that it's part of that approval, and you have the right, under those circumstances that I just laid out, to require them. Why is that? Why do we have this position? I think it's important, if you're familiar with Sandy Hollow Road, there are no sidewalks on Sandy Hollow Road at all. There's nothing. This was a point that we brought up in 2019 in the addition, that this sidewalk would literally be a section of sidewalk, a very limited frontage in front of the preschool to the corner, and quite frankly, it's to the wrong corner because the sidewalk's on the other side of Allen Street altogether. Sandy Hollow Road is also a designated scenic road in the town. So any kind of work within the town right of way and along the town right of way needs town council approval. Generally, sidewalks have not been constructed along scenic roads because we try to keep the rock walls, the natural appearance of that area. We don't think it's appropriate in this area either. Sandy Hollow Road is a beautiful rural road. We're out at Allen Street. We're out toward the busier end of it, but there's no sidewalks along that road, and there shouldn't be a sidewalk for this. I think it's also important to see what the nature of the use is on this site. This is a preschool daycare facility. We have internal sidewalks on our property for pedestrian safety and the safety of the children who are on our property, but we do not want to encourage the children that are on our property to go out on the road or be along the road. We have a bus drop-off area at our driveway, but we don't want to encourage pedestrian traffic for the kids, and we don't want to encourage pedestrian traffic for others in that area too. It's just not appropriate with the uses that are there. We don't want strangers walking on those sidewalks. We don't want to encourage that in the front of what is a facility for very young children. I think more importantly, though, going back to the standard, is there hasn't been any change that meets the standard that's required for you to make a decision of whether or not to remove the postponement approval. Again, in 2019, the commission said that this issue would be revisited only when additional development or pedestrian activity changes the conditions in the area. Since 2019, and your staff just pointed to this point, there's been no additional development in the Sandy Hollow neighborhood. In fact, the only other development was a subdivision that this commission decided sidewalks along Sandy Hollow would not be required at the same time that this addition was approved. And there's no evidence, other than perhaps some anecdotal evidence about a specific neighbor who might want to walk their dog in the area. There's no other evidence that there's any appreciable change in pedestrian activity in the area that would warrant sidewalk construction. More importantly, there's no significant evidence of increased traffic of a vehicular nature either. One might be able to argue that if Sandy Hollow Road has become much busier with cars, maybe a sidewalk might be appropriate. But that hasn't been presented to the commission. There's no information along those lines that have been put forward. And in fact, since the onset of COVID, it's widely understood that traffic levels have actually decreased statewide 20–25% during that same period, and they haven't returned to pre-COVID levels. So this, of all times, is not an appropriate time to suggest that there's any evidence that sidewalks are necessary. I think also you need to look at this on a case-by-case basis. We are coming out of a global pandemic, that has shut many small businesses in this area down. One of the hardest hit industries has been the daycare industry. They were shut down by Governor Lamont and the state during most of the crisis. Barbara Hanowitz, my client, she actually used her own personal savings to keep her staff employed when she was shut down because she didn't want them to go without food or the ability to pay their mortgage. She wiped herself out in COVID. She's just back this year for the first time. Who are her customers? Who are the people who send their kids to her facility? These are our EE workers. There are Pfizer workers. They're the people who work at our sub base. It is her small business that allows the industry in this area to continue because people need a place for their kids to go. You may decide at the end of the day that sidewalks are something that would be good in this location. I don't think they are. I don't think they should be installed right now. But to put this requirement on a small businesswoman who's basically struggling to keep her head above water right after a pandemic is fundamentally unfair. And I would really urge you to consider that and at least give her time to get on her feet and be able to reestablish her business, and let's allow the people to get back from the pandemic. Small businesses in Groton need help right now. We don't need more burdens on them. Finally, and I think this is really important too, I talked with Deb about this, and Deb alerted me to this, but the state of Connecticut has a sidewalk project that they're working on for Allen Street. And in fact, the connection from Sandy Hollow Road to the corner and across the street to Allen is part of the state DOT sidewalk project. Now, we were hoping that project would be implemented this summer. And I guess there's been some recent correspondence that reached out, and that isn't going to happen. It's going to be a couple of years off. But the state has already proposed this same work to be done as part of their Allen Street reconstruction efforts. So to ask a small businesswoman who's struggling to fund something now when there's no basis for it, no evidence that's been submitted to the commission that requires it, I think, again, it's fundamentally unfair, particularly when the state of Connecticut is in the process of putting this in at all of our costs as part of a larger community effort. And so for those reasons, I'd ask you not to take any action. Leave this sidewalk project in postponement. Put it on your calendar, maybe revisit in a year or 2 years from now to see and make a judgment then. Has something changed? Is there a development in the area that warrants this? Is there some change that's measurable? You actually have evidence, substantive evidence in the record to support a decision to cancel the postponement. That there's pedestrian activity that needs this. And absent that, I don't think you can. I think you set the rule when you made that finding. And so I'd ask you to sort of keep the status quo for now. Come back and visit in a couple of years, but certainly let Barbara get back on her feet first. So I appreciate the time and the opportunity to address it. Thanks.
Do you have any input on what the state's?
That was actually in your packet, there's an email. So the project has advanced into the design stage phase, and they're estimating that construction in 2026. And I'll note the sidewalk actually is not just in front of Precious Memories, it also is on, it's also on the
crosswalk.
And it's also in front of the ambulance where you have another sidewalk agreement
So
That the state is doing?
that the state will do.
raise one sidewalk.
There you go.
Is this gonna go down Sandy Hollow both ways or?
No, it's only going to the driveway on the plans that the state shared.
Only to Precious Memories driveway?
Right,
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, and the state's aware that it's a scenic road and they'll have to go through the public hearing process.
Also improves the crosswalk across Elm Street, doesn't it?
But right there, it's much more right, because what we have just doesn't have any detail.
Right, exactly.
That's Precious Memories right there. And there's the sidewalk from our bus stop where the kids get dropped off and they can come up. It runs across and down and then it crosses over to connect this to the west
Doesn't
side.
one of those fit? Plan show something across Elm Street.
There will be I think there will be a light at
Oh,
that
there's
intersection.
a light.
There will be 3 lights in this project,
Oh,
at least at this point.
it's sort of hard to see.
Yeah.
Nothing is shown. That's why my
Right.
problem with this is that this thing is a conceptual thing,
Yeah.
and something just threw on top of it, actually removed some features that we already had. This is what was in it. And so it's not telling me anything. Now, if in fact they're on the record as saying in 2026, if they're gonna do something, that sounds good to me. It would be really nice to know what it was, so we could get the comment on it too, because this is actually what this does. It kind of also indicates that no sidewalk connection is going to be making north across the bridge, which is one of the things we really want.
And that was brought up to them when they met informally with Public Works Planning last July.
There's plenty of room there.
Exactly.
That
Exactly.
side of that bridge is 8 feet wide.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And so this kind of ignores all that, so add that into.
But again, this has not been changed since meeting with
Right.
staff or meeting with the town council.
Well, that's what kind of arguing about. The good news for you is that it's saying that it would be 2 to 3 years for design and planned construction is 2026. That's scary for us because it means it almost sounds like they're just going to do it and then we'll find out what they have in mind. But they're still talking about the design. So rather than have all this done for free, relatively for free, our tax doesn't do it.
And connect it and make the connections.
And make the connections, so, and they might.
Because otherwise it's just a segment of sidewalk that's not connected.
And they might modify the curbs the corners too.
Correct.
So if we had a building.
Ramps.
Those things, hopefully, in fact, will change. So I would say that.
The irony of those lights is that for previous projects that are on Allen Street, they've proven to us that they don't need lights.
Let me just make a suggestion here. So I do have a sidewalk agreement with Mystic River Ambulance Association. And that agreement, they commit to construct the sidewalk by April 9, 2024. So, and perhaps, maybe 6 months before that 2024 date, you review both of these. Because if the ambulance has to build it, they need a little bit of time to know they actually truly have to build it. At that point, we can get an update from DOT as to where they are with the project and any more developed plans that they
Make a
have.
big difference if they put traffic lights.
That would be a very reasonable compromise from our perspective too. I would note also, I went back through the plans and there is no, while the requirement is on the site plan, there is no designed sidewalk on any of the plans. Your regulations today require someone to actually show what the sidewalk would look like. It doesn't exist. It's a good regulation today, but remember, these were approved under the old regulations. So to Deb's point, not only do you need time to tell somebody they need to build it, but they need time to actually draw a plan too. Because I'm not sure if the Mystic Ambulance.
They have, it's on their plan.
Ours does not.
Correct.
No, we can't force it, no, town council.
Right, oh yeah, right, and that's generally, on a good day, it's a 3-month process.
So does everybody think that it makes sense to?
Can I just add in a couple of questions? So just suppose we said tonight, build it. So what's the time?
Well, they clearly would have to design the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So depending on engineering services, right? And then from there, they would have to make application to the council. They would schedule a hearing, they would hold the hearing, they would discuss it in 3 months easily in front of the council. And then at that point, they would have the necessary approvals for to go ahead and build it. So, probably looking 6-9 months of plan development and council approval.
Plus a fair amount of hours spent just doing.
Yeah.
Then it might get shot down.
It's possible.
What's
then,
the sidewalk cost per foot?
We've estimated that to put the sidewalks, it's probably $100,000 to put the sidewalks along.
How long is it?
Several hundred feet from the,
Yeah, I don't have that
Oh, it would be the whole length.
it would be from the corner
to the driveway.
to the driveway.
Quite a ways.
Yeah, so when I talk about the serious financial aspect of that, it's not, this isn't a $10,000 item. This is significant.
It is, you should shop around for other contractors. Because I know that the piece of sidewalk that was made about 3 years ago, of course, things were, that length was 250 feet. And I stopped and tugged on the guy's sleeve and it was under $10,000.
But it depends what you have to do.
No, I get it. It's just, it's putting out a concrete sidewalk.
Concrete.
225 feet or something like that.
There's a little bit of regrading.
Yeah.
That's the problem with that area. Elsewhere, as you go east, it flattens out, you can walk on the lawn.
No, and also I would say though, the cost of it isn't my concern. And I have no position on that.
No,
That doesn't, I'm just.
You're right, and I agree with you. Here's a very interesting question though, is if you say build it and the town council says no, what happens? It's a scenic road. You can't do any improvements without the town council approval.
No, okay.
And it's something that I think your regulations don't address.
The only other thing that I would say.
Well, I mean, the town council has the say of activity in the right of way.
Mhm.
So it's possible that the sidewalk could be placed outside of the right of way. So there may be a remedy to that.
And one thing I would suggest is that there has been a change that occurred, I would say, and that would be that we did have COVID. And I know myself, and everybody was walking. And, pedestrian traffic was, car traffic. I don't know the statistics. You're, and I believe you that it went down. But I would also say that pedestrian traffic went way up. And I think that this is something that has changed, and hopefully permanently, that there will be more pedestrian traffic.
Certainly,
Especially when we do other, this is how this commission builds sidewalks, is a sidewalk to nowhere next to another sidewalk next to nowhere. And pretty soon it goes somewhere.
And again, as I said before, we acknowledge the fact that it is a requirement of our approval from 1998. We don't necessarily like it, but we acknowledge it's a requirement. All we're asking for is don't make us do it now. Revisit it when you revisit it in a couple of years or 18 months. At least let us get back on our feet, because I just think it's that straw that breaks the camel's back. There's a lot of small businesses out there that are still struggling. We're just coming out of COVID. And I'd ask you just to at least give us a little bit of additional time on that.
Can I get on the record, as you were saying, is that what's the change, and the change, and I agree, is we would have to count the people, but it seems very apparent to me, I live not too far down the road either, that pedestrian count has changed because of COVID. And it is a lot of people suddenly walking. That sidewalk along Allen Street, who would have dreamt people would be on there, and there's always people on there. So where are they going? They're going to Pequot. They're not going down to the river. People are walking up and down Pequot. They weren't doing that nearly as much before. Now they are. This is a good thing. So we want to not encourage it? No, we want to encourage it. This is a good thing. So, but I'll go with if the state's going to build it for them. That's a good thing.
The only thing I would put in is that I wasn't here in 98, but I was here in 2002, and I think you were too. So we were part of this. I think that everyone in this room has known that this was a requirement or a desire of this commission for the last 24 years at least. And that I know that the letter that precipitated this conversation was probably sent out a year ago, that we've been, that the people who brought this issue up already have been waiting a year for some sort of response. And it's imperative on us to put a deadline on this, and that expect to build this sidewalk or have the state do it within this, whatever we decide period of time. Because I think that the situation has changed out there enough that it needs to be done. I would not want to see something built and then have it ripped up in 2 years because it wasn't done to state standards or something else didn't, whatever, who knows what people want, or it doesn't integrate with whatever somebody's working on somewhere else.
You said the grades, I think you made that point.
Pointless, but I would also want I would like us to say that if Mystic Ambulance is coming in on this date and they're supposed to do it, whatever it was, July 15th,
Yeah,
2024.
April 9, 2024. They're supposed to be done with
So
it.
I would like to put that out there, that is, it would be nice to see these both sidewalks, because they're gonna connect. And they're going to connect into the rest of Allen Street. So that finishes it.
So the state says that they're likely to build this in 2026.
Yeah, I realize that, but I don't trust this is going to happen. I'm not believing the state is going to.
Would it be smart though to do something like by April 2024, which is the date that the Mystic Ambulance, you have to come back and we have to see where we are. If the state says, yeah, we're totally online, in fact, we're going to build it next year, you might say, hey, yeah, we'll wait for the state to build it. But if we get here in 2024 and the state's like, we told you 2026, but it's really 2030 now, then you can say, hey, we're not waiting for the state any longer. So is April 2024 a date where we can get back together and talk about this?
I would actually suggest it be earlier than that, because by April 2024,
Yeah.
the ambulance is supposed to be done.
Yeah,
with
we're
their
gonna-
sidewalk.
we're
So we
gonna
need to
know.
let them know as well. They don't
6
have
months
to do it.
before that. date.
Exactly.
So like October of 2023.
That's what I'm thinking.
Why don't we do that?
Yeah.
Can we do that?
And
And I
review
mean,
both of these.
We'll be happy to come back and we can get an update where we are and whether there's been positive momentum.
Yeah, yeah, and certainly we don't want to put somebody out of business.
I
And then you
appreciate
don't
that.
get anything.
And hopefully we're in a much better situation at that point.
Right.
Okay, so we'll put it on that, both review of both of
Both
these
at the
agreements.
same time. yeah.
Thank you.
Because we don't want to have the ambulance put something in that they're gonna rip up.
This ambulance, sidewalk, is that the same one that the state's gonna put in?
Yes, the state is, that's also on.
That's
yeah.
on the.
Part of the project.
That's part of
Who's paying for that?
My taxes.
State.
No, who's paying for the ambulance one? Ambulance?
the ambulance.
With this agreement, yes, they agreed to put it in. However, the state project indicates that the state will put it in instead.
So they want.
So-
It's happening all over the place. I just got out of a project in Stonington the other night, and the state is putting in sidewalks all along Route 1 in Stonington. And, you know, the question was, well, our regulations say you have to put sidewalks in front of any project that you develop. And we said, well, the state, as part of the state design process, they're starting in July. And the commission said, okay, you're right. As long as your plans meet the state specs, then we'll let the state build it for you. But if the state doesn't, the state delays, you don't get a CO unless you put a sidewalk in. So, you know, that's how they did it.
Yeah.
But a lot of towns are dealing with this because the state has a lot of sidewalk money right now.
Oh, that's cool.
What is the date that we've chosen?
October 2023. Let's see which meeting it's.
2023 or 24?
Oh,
23.
That's when the ambulance sidewalk is.
No, that's when you guys
That's
will
why we
re-review all of this.
Six
So,
on me.
right,
24th.
right.
And that would give us time then if we had to design it, if you said, hey, we're not waiting for the state anymore, then we could go from there. Thank you for your time tonight.
Count on.
I will, especially if you're here.
Businesses.
I have such low staff that I'm in rooms, I'm a teacher. Do you want me to send information? Any kind of support? Yeah. All right.
Thank you again tonight for everything.
Yeah.
See you soon.
Nice.
No applications.
Yeah, we, site plan application for 1154 Quonic Road. Additional dwelling units as well as a mixed-use building out front.
That's on your list.
Oh, it's already on there. Okay.
No,
We
it
haven't
was
gotten
not.
anything else.
Okay. No referrals,
No referrals.
reported share. The only thing I have is that I signed off the plans for the Mystic Art Association parking system. I see they already started work on that before the plans are.
Well,
approved.
they're in land records now, so. Yep.
No, I mean, they really jumped on
They
that.
did,
I was
yeah.
surprised to see that. And also for the boat repair facility on the Flanders Road. So, report of staff, the report of commission, is anyone on the commission?
I mentioned that Deb and I attended the second, right, the second complete streets meeting. We're still trying to figure out who's going to be on it. This is a very slow and kind of. We also saw this complete streets presentation.
It's quite a while.
It was quite a while, and it hasn't changed. And so part of this discussion is how we're going to implement it. There's going to be another group that will review projects before they go out to make sure that enough attention is given to these things, and what that will be.
I had two things, but one is kind of fun. I went to the Lyman Allen Museum for art opening on Saturday, I think it was Friday night, and I gotta tell you, it's fantastic. There's a man who collects paintings from the Mystic Art Colony, which preceded ours from 1890 to 1950. And he has an amazing collection. He lives on Edgecombe Street of all buildings and structures of all downtown Mystic, like original. I mean, the heart will blow you away. It's unbelievable. Definitely, I would say if someone wants to, any interest in that stuff, check it out because it's really great.
How long is it?
I think it goes it just opened.
Okay.
So it might be another 2 months or so. And the whole second floor is all this art. It's just amazing stuff.
Yeah, this is cool.
At the line. And then the other thing that I attended Saturday was the opening ceremony for the Marine Estuary designation which goes, it's kind of a little disjointed, but it includes most of the Groton water. And this allows, my wife could tell you better. This allows for a lot of, it's through UConn, and it provides a lot of federal money for grants for studying all kinds of different water uses, from seaweed to shellfish to mitigating all kinds of stuff. But if you read anything about it, not Blumenthal, but Chris Murphy was there, and Courtney, and the U.S. second in charge of the Department of Interior, I think was there. Was a pretty impressive group of people. But I think that's a big deal for UConn, very big deal for UConn and for Connecticut Sea Grant and our coastline. Hopefully. That's it. Oh, they had really good sandwiches too. Oh boy, it was. I got a fill. Let me tell you what. First class.
As you know, Horsley Witness started working on short-term rental regulations / ordinance. I think this week they're finishing up interviews. They wanted sort of a sample of folks that you've heard from that they're interviewing. 5 folks who run short-term rentals and 5 who have some concerns about short-term rentals in their neighborhood. So they're finishing up that. I think before the June 15 special meeting workshop that we have scheduled, they will put together just a summary of the interviews, summarize the issues that they're finding, and say whether or not the most appropriate way to address it is either through a zoning regulation or through an ordinance. So we'll have something in writing, I hope, before the June 15 meeting. At that workshop, of course, they're going to be talking about the other things they're engaged to deal with, which are the cannabis regulations and data centers.
I'm not going to be able to beat the June 15th. That was the day I could.
No.
My 70th birthday, so I'm not coming.
No, I think that was a wise choice. Yeah.
Bring our
It'll be-
whole
it'll be
Bring your-
recorded. It'll be recorded, so you can watch it.
Bring your iPod. Pad.
Oh, yeah, I'll go over there.
I don't think so. Yeah, well, you can let us know if you can.
Yeah.
There are certain things we want to address. This is really a workshop. It's not.
Right, and there will be an additional one, I'm sure.
And what is the direction that, are they moving in? Are we moving in a direction? What are we doing?
Yeah, they are. They have met with the town attorney to get a handle on Connecticut regulations. And again, they're going to sort of separate out what's the most appropriate way to deal with these issues. Is it, in some cases, is it zoning regulations or is it town ordinance? So yeah, they are, they're engaged to develop zoning regulations to address short-term rentals.
I guess the big thing is definition, right?
That's one part of it.
What is short?
Yeah, that's one part of it.
Well, I sent out that email that comes from the IRS, which is probably one of the most precise regulation writing bodies in the world. And it seemed to me like it was a pretty precise definition right there. I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. Someone out there has already defined these things, and we should probably behoove us to work with other definitions that are already determined to be legal and not do something that is counter to what other people are telling us that these things are and how they're recognized in the world. I don't know.
Well, you got state regulations.
Yeah, no doubt.
The
And I just
IRS.
don't, and it goes right back to what we've been talking about, or at least I've heard, is how are these things, how do our, my feeling is that our zoning regulations already deal with them.
Well, we'll see.
Not adequately.
Well,
Not according to what
no, I know, well, I think that there's. you
zoning
know,
enforcement officer.
yeah,
gets to-
it seems like that's, I mean, I don't know how you could read that definition that I sent out and not.
But that's just for the IRS.
Well, but my
If we
point
were
was,
to adopt.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know, that's a pretty precise definition of what it is. And so I guess I have an issue with somebody who would sit before me and say, you know, to the IRS, I am this, but to you, I am something else. And they are not, you know, they are not compatible and not the same thing. You don't get to do that in this world.
Yeah. At what point does renting out a room in your house become a commercial operation?
Yeah, well, I mean, for them, it's 15 days.
And, yeah, renting property is not addressed at all in the regulations.
No, but
Because it's not.
that doesn't mean that
That's
everything
what
that
we have
is not addressed is allowable. And we do address residential districts in our regulations, and we define them as, I mean, there's two places in there where they talk about the home daycare. I think it's there's two places in our definitions where they talk about residential home care, and there's another residential use, and they say right in there, it's residence, where people reside. And if you look that word up in the dictionary, it's the definition of residing somewhere is permanence, where you, and I would suggest where you get your mail, where you register to vote. That's what makes you a resident living in a residential area, residing there. That's what it is. It's permanent, as opposed to transient, which is not permanent. It's something else. You can't be this, you know, for the tax man and something else for the zoning official, and you're not fooling anybody. I don't think. It makes legal, I mean, it would make me uncomfortable from a legal perspective to you know, what I don't know what, I wouldn't bring my zoning official in for a tax audit, that's for sure.
Or sometimes vice versa.
I would
because
lose.
These people are doing it off the books.
They have to be consistent.
Oh, absolutely.
We have to be consistent with other regulating bodies.
Yeah.
And if we're not, we don't stand a chance of defending ourselves, and it makes a mockery of our regulations, because they are then interpreted entirely by one person. And we don't even know who that person is, because it could be this person today, and tomorrow it could be a different person who's interpreting these things, and our regulations are meaningless, because then words are meaningless. They don't mean anything. It just means what this one person thinks they mean. So that's why, I don't know how we get around this, but that's why I don't know what Horsley Witten is thinking, because I'm gonna have a problem right in the beginning, how to do this. There you go.
Now we got our application updates and the HP reports. And we can go into those. Does anyone have anything else? Accept the motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second. Second. Second.
All right, thank you.